A world where Deku possesses Ares Rewind plus one quirk could be explored. The profound implications for battles and character development within the MHA universe could be thoroughly examined. This is movie, and please give me feedback on this story so I can know where to improve. Also, if you enjoy the watching videos, please leave a like, share and comment. And check out my Patreon for early access. Jump right into the video. Izuku Midoriya's world was a loud, explosive cacophony of quirks, but his own life was silent. He was still quirkless, a designation that felt less like a lack of power and more like a cosmic mistake. At 14, his notebooks were full, 13 volumes of meticulous analysis on every known pro-hero and dozens of underground villains. But the one thing he couldn't analyze, couldn't categorize, was the hollowness in his own chest where a power should have bloomed. Today was another brutal lesson in reality. If you want a quirk so bad, Deku, take a swan dive off the roof and pray for one in your next life. Katsuki Bakugo's words were meant to sting, and they did. His explosive friend, rival, bully, had just torched the 13th volume of his analysis, leaving it soggy and smelling of nitroglycerin. Izuku trudged home, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of his impossible dream. It was in an underpass, his mind miles away, that the stench of sewage and malice assaulted him. A monstrous thing made of viscous, green sludge and razor-sharp trash materialized, its eyes glowing with predatory intent. A perfect vessel. A little squirt with a scrawny body, just the right size to hide in. Panic seized Izuku. He dropped his scorched notebook. The villain enveloped him, the suffocating slime filling his mouth, nose, and ears. He clawed uselessly at the sludge, the overwhelming terror erasing all rational thought. This is it, he thought, this is how I die. Quirkless. Just as his consciousness began to fade, a familiar, granite-solid voice boomed from the street above. I am here. All Might. The legendary hero tore into the tunnel, unleashing a single, devastating punch, the Texas Smash. The wind pressure alone scattered the villain, reducing the amorphous mass to gobs of sticky, scattered sewage. Izuku coughed, spitting out slime, his body racked with tremors. He survived. Young man, I apologize, All Might said, patting his own enormous cheek. I failed to secure the villain properly. Izuku, fueled by adrenaline and fanboy shock, stammered out his burning question, the one that had haunted him for years. Can someone without a quirk be a hero? All Might's face grew serious. He looked down at the shivering boy, then back at the scattered remains of the sludge villain. The truth was harsh, and All Might knew it. Without a quirk, it is nearly impossible. Focus on a support role, young man. It's safe. Izuku felt the last sliver of his hope crack. A few hours later, Izuku was back on the street, clutching the water bottle All Might had used to capture the villain. He was devastated, but resolute. He couldn't be a hero. He had to accept it. Then, a distant explosion echoed. Izuku's hero analyst instincts took over. He ran toward the noise, a crowd already forming. The scene was pure chaos, a street ablaze, civilians screaming, and the sludge villain, escaped from All Might's flimsy capture, had taken another hostage. The victim was Bakugo. Move, you useless scrubs. If I don't breathe fire, I'll be smothered. Bakugo roared, desperately firing small explosions, only succeeding in fueling the villain's protective inferno. Izuku didn't think. His legs moved before his brain, before his fear. He just ran. He snatched his backpack off his shoulder and hurled it, the heavy textbooks scattering. The corner of his 13th notebook, singed and soggy, struck the villain's eye. It was a useless, pathetic gesture, but it bought Bakugo a second of air. As he lunged forward, trying to claw at the villain, Izuku felt a desperate, primal surge in his chest, a feeling unlike anything he'd ever experienced. I need to fix this. I need to make this right. I need to take him back to before this moment. He wasn't wishing for a blast of fire or a surge of strength. He was wishing for reversal. Izuku's hand slapped against the villain's thick, oily body. A strange, shimmering green light, almost imperceptible, pulsed from his palm. The effect was instantaneous and baffling. The thick, dark sludge that enveloped Bakugo didn't explode or decay. It thinned. It rapidly lost its viscosity and returned to a state of harmless, refined oil. In seconds, Bakugo was free, gasping on the pavement. The villain, now little more than a pile of slippery liquid, was inert, harmless. Izuku stood there, shaking, his hand tingling. What was that, Deku? Some cheap trick. Bakugo spat, scrambling away. Izuku didn't answer. He looked at his hand. He looked at Bakugo's right arm, where the constant explosions had caused minor stress fractures. In the chaos, Izuku had instinctively reset the arm. It was now perfectly uninjured, the ache Bakugo had ignored for weeks instantly gone. Then, All Might arrived again, deflated, having rushed to the scene. He saw the bewildered boy, the shimmering, inert oil, and the perfectly healed arm of the hostage. All Might didn't see an explosion or a punch. He saw an act of pure reversal, an impossible return to zero. He looked at Izuku, a massive smile slowly spreading across his gaunt face. Young Midoriya, All Might whispered, his voice resonating with newfound awe and caution. You don't need one for all. It seems, you had your own destiny waiting for you. Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy, had just discovered his quirk, Rewind. And in the subtle, unsettling green shimmer that lingered in the air, a hint of the dangerous +1 lay dormant. The story of the symbol of peace had just been fundamentally rewritten. All Might had ushered Izuku to a secluded section of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a place still littered with mountains of salvaged junk from his own past training. The symbol of peace was in his skeletal, post-injury form, Toshi-sensei, but his eyes held a sharp, focused intensity. Young Midoriya, he began, his voice deep and gravelly. What you did was not a simple healing quirk. It was a complete reversal of state. You didn't just fix the sludge, you essentially turned it back into the harmless oil it was moments ago. You reset it. Izuku, still trembling from the reality of having a quirk, gripped his notebooks. A reset, but how? I just wished I could undo it. That, my boy, is the core of your quirk. Rewind, Toshi-sensei explained, gesturing toward a smashed, rusty washing machine. Now, try it on that. Take it back to its perfect state. Izuku hesitated, then reached out, placing his hand gently on the rusted metal. He focused, remembering the metallic shimmer from the previous night, the feeling of willing a change. A subtle green glow emanated from his palm. Instead of the gentle reversal he intended, the effect was jarring. The metal didn't just shed its rust. It groaned, buckling inward, and rapidly deconstructed. In seconds, the washing machine wasn't a restored appliance, it was a shimmering pile of raw, refined iron ore, rubber pellets, and glass sand. Izuku snatched his hand back, gasping. The pile of materials was smaller than the machine had been. Toshi-sensei stared, his jaw hanging slightly ajar. Good heavens. That was too much. Unraveling the paradox, Toshi-sensei explained the core danger of the newly named Rewind +1. Your base power, Rewind, is the ability to restore something to a defined 0 point, its perfect intended state. That's why you healed young Bakugo's arm and turned the villain into safe oil. It's an incredible rescue quirk. He pointed to the pile of raw materials. But that, young Midoriya, is the +1. Quote, the +1, what did I do? Izuku whispered, tracing the outline of the refined metal. You didn't just rewind it to a perfect washing machine, Toshi-sensei said. His voice laced with caution. You over-rewound it. You reset it to a point before it was a washing machine. You didn't just manipulate its physical state, you manipulated its causality. You returned manufactured goods to raw components. If you do that to a living person. Izuku's blood ran cold. The implication was clear. The +1 could potentially de-age a person out of existence, or revert them to a fetal state. It was a power that threatened the very fabric of life. You must learn the difference between a perfect state reset, safe, and a temporal regression, dangerous. That is your training now. Toshi-sensei stated gravely. The accidental toddler, almost. Training became a meticulous, grueling process of control. Deku spent days in the junkyard, practicing on inanimate objects. Trying to find the mental line between fix and erase. One afternoon, he was trying to restore a child's broken wooden pull toy he'd found. He concentrated, trying to reset the wood back to its unbroken form. Suddenly, a massive brown dog, a neighborhood stray, trotted up, snatching the toy and crunching on it playfully. No, wait, Izuku yelled, instinctively reaching for the dog's paw to retrieve the toy. His fingers brushed the dog's fur. The familiar green glow erupted, far brighter than he intended. The dog whimpered, and for a terrifying second, its paw looked disproportionately small. The energy pulse had been so powerful that it had begun to rewind the dog's age. Panic. Temporal regression. Izuku mentally slammed the brakes on his quirk. The dog shook its head, looking confused, and bounded away, thankfully returned to its correct age, though it had lost a few stray hairs. Izuku collapsed, sweating profusely. His head was throbbing with a peculiar, unsettling temporal headache, a buzzing noise coupled with the feeling that his memories were momentarily scrambling. Toshi-sensei rushed over. What was that? A localized time shift. I almost de-aged him, Izuku admitted, shuddering. It's too easy to go past the 0 point. The danger, young Midoriya, is that your quirk factor is inherently unstable and powerful. We must treat the +1 as a latent threat. Toshi-sensei noted. No hero should have the power to erase life or reality casually. Bakugo's tiny boot. Later that week, Deku was walking home when he ran into Bakugo, who was loudly arguing with a street vendor. Deku quickly tried to slip by, but Bakugo's heel clipped a loose stone. He stumbled, sending a small, frustrated burst of fire at the ground. Without thinking, Izuku instinctively performed a micro-reset on the sole of Bakugo's left hero boot, restoring the tread that had been slightly scraped. It was an instant, barely perceptible fix. The following morning in class, Bakugo burst through the door, hopping mad. Deku, you bastard, my left boot feels wrong. It's too tight. I swear, you used that creepy healing quirk on me last night. Izuku frantically waved his hands, trying to look innocent. I don't know what you mean, Kachan. He didn't realize I reset the boot to its perfect factory state, which was one size smaller than the slightly stretched, comfortable boot he'd been wearing for weeks. Humor focus. The great, volatile Bakugo was hobbling slightly, convinced the quirkless nerd was now using a subtle insidio as power to inflict minor fashion inconveniences. Izuku knew this was just the beginning. His power wasn't a simple smash or blast, it was a silent, reality-altering force. He was the only one who could truly control the 0 point. And the world's stability might depend on him never pushing it to +1 again. All Might sat with Izuku in the faculty lounge at UA, having secretly arranged a special training session. The imposing figure before them, wrapped in his signature scarf, was Shota Aizawa, pro-hero, Eraserhead. Aizawa yawned, rubbing his tired eyes. All Might says the brat has a rare and dangerous quirk. You think he can master it before it rewinds us all into protoplasm? Izuku stammered, intimidated by the hero's exhausted intensity. I'm trying to master the 0 point, Aizawa-sensei. I can reset small objects to perfect condition, but the +1 is too unstable. Good, Aizawa grunted. Your problem isn't power, it's precision. And mine is erasure. The unerasable effect. The test took place on a closed-off training ground. Aizawa stood 20 feet away, his eyes glowing red, his hair floating, quirk activated. Show me the limits of your rewind, Aizawa commanded. Izuku touched a pile of concrete rubble from a previous exercise. Focusing with intense effort, he commanded a perfect state reset. The rubble quickly coalesced, shedding its cracks and dust, morphing into a perfectly smooth, flawless concrete block. Aizawa blinked, but his eyes remained red. Now try to break it, and then fix it. Izuku summoned all his current physical strength, NC-ing the concrete block and leaving a clear dent. He instantly slammed his hand onto the dented area, performing a rapid micro-reset. The dent vanished. The block was perfect again. Aizawa let his erasure effect drop. Fascinating. While my quirk was active, you couldn't initiate the rewind. It was like trying to start an engine without fuel. But once the quirk began, the effect became a state of reality that my quirk couldn't reverse or stop. All Might clarified, Aizawa's quirk erases the trigger mechanism, young Midoriya, but not the outcome. Once you've established the 0 point, it's a temporary rule change in reality. The binding cloth and instant recovery. The next phase was a direct application test. Aizawa lunged, throwing his capture weapon, a specialized binding cloth, with blinding speed. Izuku reacted defensively, focusing his quirk on his own body. As the cloth wrapped around his legs, constricting his muscles, Izuku used a rapid-fire sequence of micro-resets on the constricted muscles. The cloth was still tight, but his legs didn't ache. Every millisecond of muscle strain, blood flow restriction, and micro tear was instantly rewound to a state of perfect, fresh muscle health. He's neutralizing the damage as fast as the cloth inflicts it, Aizawa noted, pulling harder, trying to strain the boy. His durability is infinite, as long as he has stamina to fuel the rewind. All Might gasped. Izuku's forehead beaded with sweat. While the muscles felt fine, the sheer mental effort of constantly resetting himself was a tremendous stamina drain. He was perfect, but exhausted. Finally, he gave up the internal resets. Panting heavily, he focused a single, external rewind on the section of the binding cloth around his ankles. The fibers of the cloth, woven by a master tailor, suddenly loosened. They didn't decay, they simply reset to a state before they had been tightened, a brief, slackened loop. Izuku yanked his feet free. Aizawa stopped, his eyes wide. He didn't need to destroy it. He just unwilled my attack's momentum. That is dangerous. The humorous strategy. As Aizawa was collecting his cloth, Izuku, still exhausted, accidentally had his hand against a stack of discarded rubber tires. A sliver of the +1 energy leaked out. The tires didn't turn to raw sap, instead, they all reverted to a perfectly brand new, slippery state, freshly oiled and highly polished. Aizawa, stepping onto the pile, promptly slipped and performed a graceless, sprawling tumble, landing with a loud thump amidst the suddenly immaculate tires. Izuku clamped a hand over his mouth, trying desperately not to laugh. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice dangerously even as he slowly untangled himself from his scarf. You will be running 20 laps as punishment for structural destabilization. Humor focus. Aizawa, the perpetually composed hero, was temporarily defeated by accidental, perfectly polished tires. The irony that Deku's mistake simply made the objects too perfect was not lost on All Might. A deeper warning. Later, as Aizawa administered a well-deserved, exhausting lecture, he offered a crucial piece of insight: your power makes you a perfect tank and a terrifying support. But if you rely on the +1, you risk more than just physical stamina. That temporal headache. It's your brain fighting the instability of the timeline. You use the +1 too often. And you won't just reset a car, you'll reset your own memories. Aizawa left Deku with a single, chilling thought: your greatness won't be in how much you can reset, but in how much you choose to leave alone. Izuku knew Aizawa was right. His hero journey wouldn't be about increasing power, it would be about mastering an impossible degree of ethical restraint and precision. The incident with Eraserhead had reaffirmed Izuku Midoriya's greatest fear. His quirk was less a power and more a reality instability engine. His training immediately intensified, shifting from mere repetition to painstaking, philosophical self-control. All Might, or Toshi-sensei, as he was now exclusively known during training, insisted on daily exercises to define the 0 point for hundreds of different objects. The objective was to teach Izuku's subconscious to instantly recognize the perfect, original state of anything he touched, preventing the dangerous slip into temporal regression, the +1. Think of it like tuning a radio, young Midoriya, Toshi-sensei instructed, watching Izuku from the safety of a rusted-out bus shell at Dagoba Beach. The 0 point is the clear station. The +1 is the static, the noise, the black hole of temporal instability. Izuku was working on a collection of everyday items, ranging from a cracked ceramic mug to a moldy piece of discarded bread. He'd learned quickly that organic matter was far more challenging. Rewinding a mug was a simple structural fix, rewinding something biological meant manipulating a constant, internal clock. He placed his fingers on the hardened, green and white mold of the bread. He focused. 0 point. Back to fresh, fluffy white bread. Only the structure, only the moment before decay. A soft, controlled green shimmer pulsed. The mold receded, the bread softening, returning perfectly to its original, packaged state. Success. Excellent. Control is everything, Toshi-sensei praised. Now, try that. He pointed to a small, wooden birdhouse perched on a junk pile. It had suffered years of weather damage, its paint was peeling, its roof was warped, and one side was rotten with dry rot. Izuku walked up and laid his hands on the weathered wood. This required a composite reset, structural, chemical, and aesthetic. He reached deep, defining the 0 point as the moment the birdhouse was finished by its carpenter. Before weather, before rot. The green light intensified, and the rewind began. The rotten wood hardened, the cracked paint smoothed and brightened to a vibrant, fresh coat of blue. The roof snapped back into its perfect geometric shape. It was a beautiful, flawless restoration. But then, the +1 anxiety surged. Izuku felt the irresistible, tempting pull to push further. Why stop at the perfect birdhouse? Why not rewind the lumber back to the perfect tree? The perfect seed. He snatched his hands away, panting, adrenaline spiking. His head felt tight. A buzzing pressure building behind his eyes, the unmistakable onset of a temporal headache. He looked at the birdhouse. A small, almost invisible shimmer pulsed faintly around it, evidence of the near miss. You almost went past the 0 point again, Toshi-sensei observed, crossing his massive arms. You must develop a hard, mental stop. A self-imposed ceiling on your power. Izuku nodded, exhausted. This wasn't training. It was meditation with catastrophic consequences. The fateful encounter. Later that day, near the park boundary, Izuku was distracted, walking with his head down, still wrestling with the residual temporal headache. He was so absorbed in his self-critique. I need to be faster. I need to be safer. What if I accidentally rewind a villain's uniform and they disappear with it? That he failed to notice a figure walking toward him. Suddenly, a sharp, whimpering bark broke his concentration. A little girl, no older than 4, with bright, sparkling eyes and 2 perfectly braided pigtails, was sitting on the grass, sobbing. Next to her was her toy, a small, stuffed bunny, cheap and well-loved, but now torn completely in half by a large, stray dog that had just bolted across the park. My bun. The girl wailed, clutching the 2 halves of the shredded toy. Instinct, the same pure, desperate instinct that had made him rush the sludge villain, took over. He saw the distress, the brokenness. And his quirk demanded to fix it. It's okay. Izuku knelt immediately. I can fix him. Don't worry, I can make him perfect. He gently took the 2 halves of the bunny. He placed them together and activated his rewind. A beautiful, soft green light flowed from his fingers, stitching the frayed seams, fluffing the flattened cotton stuffing, restoring the bunny's plastic eye to its unscratched original shine. It was a flawless perfect state reset. The girl sniffled, her eyes wide with wonder, clutching the miraculously whole toy. He's brand new. Izuku smiled, a small sense of relief washing over him. This was the safe, rescue potential of his quirk. Just then, the large stray dog from before trotted back, drawn by the smell of a discarded sandwich. It was a massive golden retriever, gentle but clumsy, clearly the culprit that had ripped the bunny. As the dog passed, its tail wagged and brushed right against Izuku's hand, the hand still charged with latent rewind energy. The terrifying slip. The contact was a complete accident, a fleeting, unintentional touch. But the dog was organic, warm, and constantly changing, a much harder target than a piece of bread or wood. And Izuku's mental guard had dropped from the high-stress training and the relief of successfully fixing the bunny. The dormant +1 surged, reacting violently to the complex organic matter and the momentary lack of a defined 0 point. A blinding, intense flash of green energy erupted from Izuku's hand, enveloping the dog's rear leg. The dog let out a sharp, surprised yelp. Its fur seemed to melt and regrow in an instant. Then, its size began to shrink. Rapidly. The golden retriever, a majestic, fully grown adult animal, was suddenly a 6-month-old puppy, still fluffy and oversized. But the temporal regression didn't stop. The puppy's legs grew shorter, its snout changed, and its coat thinned. In a terrifying span of less than 2 seconds, the dog was reduced to a small, helpless newborn pup, its eyes still closed, whimpering confusedly. Oh, my God, Izuku whispered, his face draining of color. The little girl, who had been laughing, stared at the whimpering newborn where a large dog had been. Her laughter stopped. Izuku immediately threw his hands back, breaking contact. The newborn pup lay on the grass, safe but completely reverted in age. A severe temporal headache hit Izuku like a physical punch. His ears rang, his vision blurred, and his memories scrambled violently. Was I always 14? What did I eat this morning? Was Aizawa's scarf green or gray? His mind was fighting to retain its integrity against the temporal flux he had just unleashed. The dog's distressed owner, an elderly man, came running up, drawn by The commotion and the dog's strange yelps. He stared at the tiny, blind pup. Where's Goldie? Where's my dog? Izuku could only stammer out the horrific truth. I'm so sorry. I over-rewound him. He's a newborn now. The ethical crisis and stamina cost. Toshi-sensei, having heard the strange, sharp temporal noise, arrived moments later. He took one look at Izuku, pale and clutching his head, and the tiny, newborn pup. And understood the severity of the slip. Young Midoriya, you are completely drained, Toshi-sensei said, helping Izuku to sit. The temporal headache was so intense that Izuku felt physically sick. His body felt heavy, his mind sluggish. The cost of using the +1, even accidentally, was devastating. They spent the next hour explaining the impossible truth to the owner and the little girl. The owner was distraught but, seeing Izuku's genuine terror and apology, agreed to take the newborn pup and raise him again, albeit years earlier than planned. The ethical dilemma was crushing. I didn't mean to, sensei. I just tried to grab him, and the 0 point, it just vanished, Izuku confessed later, tears of shame in his eyes. That is the paradox of rewind +1. Toshi-sensei replied, somber. It is the power of a god, and yet you are only a boy. The temptation to rewind the complexity of life to its simplest, most fundamental form, its +1, is strong. Especially when you are panicked or fatigued. He paused, resting a massive hand on Izuku's shoulder. From now on, we define a new boundary: never use the +1 on a living creature. Your quirk is designed to restore, not to erase. The life you save must be the life you know. Izuku realized that the dog incident had been his most crucial lesson. His power wasn't a hero's tool, it was a cosmic responsibility. If a panicked touch could revert a dog to a newborn, what could he do to a person in the chaos of a villain fight? The incident solidified the necessity of absolute precision. Izuku spent the rest of the week practicing on complex, disassembled electronics, not just restoring them, but restoring them with their memories intact, ensuring the circuit boards remembered the data they previously held. This was his first step toward mastering the fine art of causality control, ensuring the rewind only reversed physical state, not history. The near tragedy of the accidental toddler served as a crucial lesson. The +1 was not a tool for heroism, but a catastrophic liability. Izuku's focus shifted entirely to maximizing the utility of the 0 point, the pay. RFECT state reset, specifically on his own body and mind. If I can instantly reset any damage or fatigue, why can't I reset any mental blockage or missed detail? Izuku hypothesized one evening, furiously scribbling a new section in his now revised notebook, Volume 14, Rewind Mechanics and Ethical Boundaries. Perfecting the punch. Training with Toshi-sensei, All Might became a cycle of maximum exertion, instant reset, analysis, and repetition. Toshi-sensei started by challenging Izuku to master a simple, perfect right hook. For most students, perfecting a physical motion takes months of muscle memory development. For Izuku, it took an hour. Izuku would execute the punch with full power. His form would inevitably be sloppy, his shoulder too low, his hip rotating too late, his core unstable. The moment the punch landed, causing strain and micro-tears in his amateur muscles, Izuku would immediately activate a 0 point rewind on his right arm, shoulder, and core. The fatigue vanished. The soreness reset. The muscle memory from the imperfect punch was physically erased, reverting his body to its state just before the attempt. He would then execute the punch again, instantly recalling the analytical data of his previous failure. Attempt 1. Hip rotation was 0.05 seconds too slow. Reset. Attempt 2. Elbow flared out at the last second. Reset. Attempt 3. Stance was too wide, reducing leverage. Reset. By combining the physical reset, erasing the exhaustion and poor muscle memory with his supreme analytical mind, Izuku was compressing months of training into minutes. He wasn't training muscle memory. He was training analytical execution. Within 60 minutes, Izuku was executing a punch with the fluid, powerful precision of a seasoned combatant, capable of striking the same target point with flawless consistency. Incredible, Toshi-sensei muttered, watching the boy's seemingly effortless perfection. You are learning through perfect failure. You get all the data with none of the cost. Hyper-speed study. Izuku soon applied this terrifying efficiency to his academic preparation for the UA entrance exam. The written portion, historically a hurdle for prospective heroes, became a simple exercise in memory reset. He would read a complex history chapter on quirk evolution, trying to memorize every detail. When his brain reached the point of saturation, where the new data began to push out the old, he would use a controlled, minor rewind on the centers of his brain responsible for fatigue and short-term memory overflow. He wasn't erasing the knowledge, but resetting the mental state of being overloaded and tired. He was, in effect, instantly refreshing his focus and cognitive stamina. He could study for 18 hours straight, his mind is fresh and receptive in the final hour as it was in the first. Humor focus. One evening, Izuku accidentally focused his mental rewind slightly too hard during an intense calculus session. He successfully reset his mental fatigue but also momentarily reset his memory of what he was currently studying. He stared at the complex equation on the page, recognizing his own handwriting but having no memory of the solution, only to look down, see his pencil, and realize the memory gap. He spent 5 frantic minutes re-deriving the entire equation, sweating profusely. He learned quickly that mental resets required even finer precision than physical ones. The problem of stagnation. Despite his rapid improvements, a problem emerged: stagnation. Izuku could perfect a technique, but he never truly faced the physical consequences of failure. "You are perfect, young Midoriya, but you are not hardened," Toshi-sensei observed. "Your body always defaults to the 0 point, the perfect, uninjured state. You lack the natural scars, the micro-adaptations, and the sheer will born from pushing past genuine pain." The lack of natural, permanent adaptation meant that while he could execute a move perfectly, a sustained, high-pressure fight would rely entirely on his stamina to maintain the continuous flow of internal resets. If his stamina broke, the damage would be catastrophic, with no natural resilience to fall back on. This realization led to Izuku's most crucial strategy, the rewind buffer. He trained to execute moves flawlessly and then delay the physical reset for up to 10 minutes. He forced himself to feel the ache, feel the fatigue, and feel the imperfect muscle contraction. He would then, and only then, hit the 0 point, achieving perfection while simultaneously building the mental fortitude needed for sustained conflict. He was no longer just the boy who could reset reality. He was the analyst who could use the reset to achieve perfection, a hyper-efficient, eternally fresh fighter ready for the UA entrance exam. Izuku Midoriya arrived at the UA high school gates feeling a confidence he'd never known. His academic studies, perfected by mental rewinds, had allowed him to ace the written entrance exam. Now, the practical exam loomed. His body was physically in top condition, a result of his constant 0-point resets, ensuring every muscle fiber was always at its strongest, freshest state. He nervously smoothed his uniform, feeling the eyes of the other candidates, including a familiar, angry glare. "Don't think just because you got some cheap healing trick that you're anywhere near me, Deku." Bakugo Katsuki hissed, explosions crackling in his palms. "You try to rewind one of my explosions, and I'll rewind your face." Izuku merely gave a determined nod. "I'm going to follow the hero principle, Kachan. Restoration and rescue." Present Mike's revelation. Inside the auditorium, Present Mike's loud, energetic voice explained the practical exam: accumulate 8 points by destroying robotic villains. He detailed the 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point robots, and then, the dreaded 0-pointer. As Present Mike finished, Izuku raised his hand, gaining the attention of the entire stadium, including an overly zealous Iida Tenya. "Sir, with all due respect, I believe the point system is flawed for my specific quirk," Izuku stated calmly. Present Mike looked intrigued. "Oh, why's that, listener?" "My quirk is rewind," Izuku explained, projecting confidence. "I can instantly return any inorganic object to its perfect, factory state. If I strike a robot, I won't just destroy it. I would perform a temporal regression, a +1, and risk turning its metal components into raw ore. That is a dangerous, non-heroic use of my power," he continued, pointing to the 0-pointer schematic. "My highest point potential is in rescue points. If a building is collapsing, I can instantly restore its structure. If another candidate is injured, I can instantly heal them. Therefore, My strategy will focus solely on stabilization, repair, and neutralizing environmental hazards." The auditorium buzzed. The examiners were stunned. No candidate had ever openly declared a strategy focused entirely on support and restraint before the exam began. Iida stood up, bowing sharply. "A logical and self-aware approach, Midoriya. Commendable restraint in the face of immense power." Bakugo just snarled, clearly viewing this as another one of Deku's cheap tricks. The strategic constraints. Izuku's self-imposed rule was critical. 0 point on structure, 0 point on self, never +1 on anything. His unique strength lay in controlling the battlefield without destruction. He realized that a collapsed wall was an environmental hazard worth more in rescue potential than an exploded robot. As the gates burst open, the students charged. Izuku moved, but not toward the nearest 3-point robot. He ran toward a section of street already riddled with craters and falling debris from Bakugo's initial explosion. He leapt onto a collapsing fire escape and slammed his palm onto the cracked concrete wall of a building. The rewind began. The concrete healed, the structural damage reversed, and the fire escape snapped back to its original, safe configuration. He moved to the street, touching a massive crater. The ground instantly bubbled, resetting the rubble back into perfectly smooth, safe asphalt. Izuku was a blur of 0-point resets, creating perfect, safe lanes for other students to fight while neutralizing the danger to civilians who were simulated in this environment. "Look at that kid," a proctor exclaimed, watching the monitors. "He hasn't touched a villain, but he's already secured the entire city block. He's making the environment safer." The implosion. Finally, a group of 3-point robots cornered Izuku, trying to trap him. He knew he couldn't use the +1, but he had an alternative. He placed his hand on the pavement beneath the robots. He activated a focused rewind +1, a tiny flicker designed to target the ground directly beneath the largest robot. He didn't rewind the asphalt to its perfect state, he pushed the place +1 enough to turn the asphalt beneath the robot's foot back into loose, unstable sand, a state before it was compacted. The 3-ton robot lost its foundation, immediately toppling and imploding under its own weight as its gears ground against the sudden shift in gravity and terrain. It was an ingenious use of the +1 on inorganic matter, using temporal regression to create strategic instability rather than outright erasure. The result? 0 combat points, but 3 robots neutralized by environmental manipulation, giving him high marks for strategic thinking. The 0-pointers challenge. With only minutes left, the gigantic 0-pointer robot materialized, a tower of metal and destruction. Most candidates fled, but Izuku noticed Uraraka Ochako trapped beneath a massive piece of debris. This was the moment of ethical failure or true heroism. Izuku didn't hesitate. He rushed toward Uraraka, the 0-pointer's arm smashing down nearby, causing a shockwave. He slammed his hands onto the heavy debris trapping Uraraka, activating his rewind. The debris instantly returned to its 0 point, a flawless, unbroken slab, allowing him to safely lift the now perfect slab off of her. "Are you okay?" he gasped. "Why yes. But that thing." Uraraka pointed at the colossal 0-pointer, now turning its attack on them. Izuku knew a simple 0-point reset wouldn't stop the 0-pointer. Its sheer size and momentum would overpower his healing. He had to use the +1. He sprinted toward the 0-pointer's massive foot, the temporal headache already beginning to throb in anticipation. This was the largest, most complex object he had ever targeted for the +1. He jumped high, planting both hands firmly on the metal plating of the robot's ankle. Rewind +1. He didn't aim to destroy it. He aimed to over-rewind its internal components just enough to cause structural and mechanical failure. The green light that flared was blinding, a chaotic storm of temporal energy. The robot's armor didn't buckle, it melted and reformed, instantly reverting its advanced circuitry back into basic copper wiring, its complex motor back into raw steel. The massive robot seized up, its mechanical existence reversing violently before its very joints. The entire structure collapsed in a shuddering implosion of rapidly de-aged components, a tower of metal turning back into inert materials. Izuku fell back, utterly drained. The temporal headache was a searing fire that momentarily scrambled his vision and hearing. A clear, unsettling temporal shimmer lingered over the wreckage. A visible sign of the dangerous +1 abuse. He had saved Uraraka and neutralized the threat, but at a tremendous physical and ethical cost. He was utterly spent, and the feeling of early touching the void of temporal regression lingered. Izuku was carried out of the exam, having accumulated 0 combat points but an unprecedented score in rescue and strategic neutralization. He had proved his point. He was not a destructive hero, but the ultimate force of restoration, provided he could survive the backlash of his own terrifying power. The week following the UA entrance exam was agonizing for Izuku. His recovery from the massive, destabilizing use of the +1 on the 0-pointer was slow. The pervasive temporal headaches lingered, leaving him feeling perpetually jet-lagged and fragmented. He was physically fine, a testament to his continuous self-resets, but mentally exhausted from fighting the causality backlash. "You pushed your power far too hard," Toshi-sensei scolded him over a video call. Looking severely disappointed, "You nearly rewound your own existence. That kind of temporal abuse costs more than stamina, it costs integrity." Izuku knew he was right. He had compromised his ethical boundary to save Uraraka, and the memory of the robot's structure unraveling into raw components was haunting. The acceptance letter. Finally, the letter arrived. It was addressed personally, sealed with the UA stamp. Izuku, heart pounding, tore it open. Out popped a small, round projector, which immediately cast an image of All Might onto his desk. "I am here." As a projection, All Might boomed. He explained Izuku's results. 0 villain points. But his rescue point score was astronomical, the highest in UA history. "Your heroic spirit, young Midoriya, was undeniable," All Might declared. "You risked everything to save another, while simultaneously neutralizing the single greatest environmental threat, the 0-pointer. But your true success came from your strategic restraint on the other robots, focusing on stabilization. You demonstrated the unique potential of the 0-point hero." He paused, his image leaning in conspiratorially. "I'll be teaching at UA this year. Your journey starts now. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya, to the hero course." Inko Midoriya burst into tears of overwhelming joy and relief. Izuku, tears streaming down his face, felt a potent mixture of pride and dread. He was a hero, but a hero perpetually on the razor's edge of reality. The faculty whispers. Meanwhile, in a darkened UA faculty conference room, the proctors reviewed the footage of the exam. Specifically Izuku's final move. "That level of temporal manipulation is unprecedented," Midnight murmured, shivering slightly. "His rewind isn't just restorative, it's preemptive," Aizawa observed, staring at the unsettling image of the robot's components rapidly de-aging. "It's the stable version of that unstable quirk we investigated years ago." Nezu, the principal, sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Indeed, the energy signature is almost identical to the highly volatile quirk belonging to the Yakuza boss, Kai Chisaki." Smintas added, "The implications are huge. If Chisaki, or anyone with knowledge of that volatile quirk, sees Midoriya's perfect, controlled version, they will see him as the key," Nezu finished, his voice unusually grave. Asaki needs a stable quirk factor to replicate and weaponize his destructive research. Midoriya's rewind +1 is the most stable form of that power factor known to exist. We must protect him at all costs." The faculty agreed to keep a tight lid on the specifics of Izuku's quirk, officially labeling it a highly potent, restoration quirk. The humorous first day. Izuku's first day in Class 1A was a comedy of nerves and accidental awkwardness. He entered the classroom to find Iida Tenya chopping the air, giving precise instructions on seating arrangements. "Midoriya, your strategic thinking in the exam was exemplary. However, your lack of punctuality is a breach of decorum." Izuku rushed to apologize, but as he moved past Iida's desk, his backpack strap snagged on Iida's perfectly polished shoe. Instinctively, and without thinking, Izuku's hand twitched, sending a tiny 0-point reset into the shoe's scuffed leather. Iida stopped mid-chop. "Wait, my shoe. It feels new. Did you use the cheap trick again?" Humor focus. Bakugo, overhearing the exchange from across the room, exploded in laughter. The restoration freak is hitting him with shoe-shining powers. "You're the cobbler hero, Deku." Uraraka, now sitting behind him, leaned in. "Your power is amazing, Midoriya-kun. You make everything so clean." Izuku stammered, his face bright red. He was the hero who could reset reality. And his classmates thought he was a cleaning enthusiast. The source of the echo. Later, during the introductions, Aizawa entered the room, looking even more tired than usual. He conducted a rapid-fire dismissal of their notions of heroism, culminating in the quirk apprehension test. Before the test, Izuku found himself alone with All Might, who was now his homeroom teacher in his skeletal form. Young Midoriya, Aizawa and I have a crucial warning, Toshi-sensei said, his voice low. Your quirk, this rewind +1, is incredibly rare. The only other person known to possess a version of it is a young girl. Possibly still being held by a dangerous Yakuza organization. A Yakuza organization, the Shi-Hasaikai, led by the aforementioned Kai Chisaki, known by the villain name Overhaul. His quirk is a mirror image of yours, disassembly and reassembly, a destructive, chaotic version of resetting matter. He's obsessed with quirk factors. Toshi-sensei's eyes locked onto Izuku's. Your stable power, young Midoriya, is the echo of that girl's unstable one. And it is the one thing Overhaul needs to weaponize his hatred of quirks. Be discreet. Be controlled. The future of heroism, and perhaps that girl's life, depends on your absolute mastery of the 0 point. Izuku felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. His journey wasn't just about becoming a hero, it was about protecting a unique, dangerous power from falling into the hands of the one villain whose power could directly counter and exploit his own. The final fight of the story had just been foreshadowed. Class 1A's foundational hero training began with the classic exercise, battle training, supervised by All Might. The pairings were set, Izuku and Iida against Bakugo and Uraraka, pit-ing speed and precision against explosion and anti-gravity. The calculated erasure. Bakugo, fueled by rage and disbelief that Deku was now in the same class, launched a massive, concentrated explosion, his signature move. Izuku didn't dodge. He stood his ground, raised his right arm, and focused a tight, microscopic rewind field. He wasn't targeting the entire explosion, just the immediate contact zone between the superheated air and his gauntlet. The moment the explosion impacted, Izuku activated the 0 point reset on the concentrated heat energy and concussive force. The explosion didn't vanish, nor did it rebound. It simply reversed its energy state at the point of impact. The superheated air was instantly cooled, and the shockwave was functionally unwilled back into mere localized sound. Like a rapidly deflating balloon. The effect was instantaneous and utterly bizarre. Bakugo's attack, designed for maximum destruction, was neutralized into a puff of cool air and allowed whomp. Bakugo stared, his mouth agape. His hands smoking harmlessly. What was that? You stopped it. How did you stop my best attack? I didn't stop it, Kachan, Izuku said, flexing his uninjured arm. I returned the explosion's components, heat, pressure, and gas, back to their perfect, stable, pre-combustion state. It was a calculated erasure of energy. Your quirk is still active, but its immediate effect was reset. Strategy. The perfect defense. The entire battle became a demonstration of Izuku's strategic superiority. Against Bakugo's attack, when Bakugo charged, Izuku didn't fight back. He used rapid, successive micro-resets on his own muscles to maintain perfect form and zero fatigue, making him an endless defensive unit. He then used the rewind buffer developed in Chapter 5 on his legs. When Bakugo tried to trip him, Izuku felt the twist and strain, analyzed the mechanical failure, and then hit the 0 point, restoring his ligaments just before they snapped. He used the failure data to adjust his foot placement instantly. Against Uraraka's quirk, Uraraka made a powerful move, touching a massive pile of rubble, making it float. Iida, using his engine legs, struggled to control the flying debris. Izuku simply leapt onto the largest piece of floating rock and placed his hand on it. Rewind. The rock instantly returned to its perfect, unzeroed state, crashing harmlessly and safely to the ground. Uraraka had no effect on the rewind effect once it was activated. He's the ultimate counter, Aizawa observed from the monitoring room. He's not just powerful, he makes the concept of damage temporarily irrelevant. Humor. The Iida factor. Iida, driven by the need for speed and efficiency, tried to rush a door, only to miscalculate the turning radius, scraping his knee painfully on the wall. Izuku, rushing past to address a falling piece of ceiling, instinctively slapped Iida's knee. 0-point reset. Iida immediately stopped running, feeling the sudden, jarring perfection of his joint. He was confused. Midoriya, my patella. It is restored. But my shame is not. You denied me the valuable lesson of enduring physical consequence. Iida declared, chopping the air furiously. Humor focus. You can always choose to learn the lesson later, Iida-kun. Izuku replied with a straight face, but structural integrity is my first priority. Iida spent the rest of the battle analyzing the ethical ramifications of having instant physical perfection forced upon him, slowing down his movements and much to Bakugo's intense annoyance. The +1 flicker. In the climax, Bakugo, frustrated, launched an explosion directly at Uraraka, hoping to force Izuku to choose. Izuku reacted in a split second. He slapped the ground between Bakugo and Uraraka. A focused, contained rewind +1 flicker. He didn't rewind the ground to sand, too dangerous. He rewound the friction on the ground in a small, 1-meter square area to a state before it was properly paved and rough, turning it instantly into highly polished, slippery ice. Bakugo's explosive thrust carried him forward, but his feet hit the polished ground, sending him ding uncontrollably far past the target zone and directly into a wall. The explosion missed Uraraka entirely. The use of the +1 was minimal, tactical, and contained to inorganic matter, but devastatingly effective. Izuku and Iida won. The analyst's new notebook. That evening, Izuku began working on Volume 15, Rewind Tactics. He realized his power turned his analytical mind into a real-time combat strategy machine. He documented 3 crucial rewind tactics. 1. 0-point denial. Using the 0-point on an opponent's quirk effect, e.g., cooling Bakugo's heat to deny a simple outcome, forcing them to re-strategize. 2. 3. Strategic regression, inorganic only, using a tiny +1 flicker to rewrite the properties of the inorganic environment, e.g., turning friction int ice to neutralize targets without harming them. 4. 5. The rewind buffer, consciously allowing injuries or fatigue to set in, collecting analytical data on the failure point, and then resetting only after the data is secured, ensuring continuous physical and mental growth. 6. Izuku Midoriya was not training to be the strongest hero, he was training to be the perfect hero, a tactical, ethical surgeon of reality. The unforeseen simulation joint, USJ, was meant to be a simple rescue exercise, but it became a chaotic battleground when the League of Villains launched a surprise attack. Shigaraki Tamura, Kurogiri, and the hulking, mindless Nomu appeared, instantly plunging Class 1A into peril. Healing the foundation. The moment Aizawa-sensei leapt into the fray, Izuku's analytical mind went into overdrive. He knew his role was not traditional offense. His value lay in maintaining the structural and physical integrity of the entire scene, the ultimate support pillar. The villains, designed to push students to their limits, began inflicting damage. But wherever a student or structure was compromised, Izuku was there. Shiro's arm. Shiro was struck by a minor shockwave, causing a painful muscle strain. Izuku, passing by, slapped Shiro's arm with a quick, focused 0-point reset. Shiro blinked, feeling the pain vanish instantly, the muscle perfectly restored. The sea. All-lapsing dome. The Nomu's sheer force began cracking the central dome structure. Izuku placed both hands on a massive fissure. A concentrated, continuous rewind flowed, instantly repairing the concrete, steel, and glass, making the dome an unbreakable structure as long as he focused his power. He's canceling the environment damage faster than we can inflict it, Shigaraki complained, scratching his neck furiously. This isn't fun. The Aizawa conundrum. The critical moment came when the Nomu brutalized Aizawa-sensei. The teacher, overwhelmed by the shock absorption and sheer force, was slammed into the ground. His elbow and shoulder brutally shattered. Izuku rushed forward, ignoring the danger. He knelt quickly and placed both hands on Aizawa's mangled arm. He poured maximum, but controlled, 0-point energy into the arm. Bones snapped back into alignment, torn ligaments reattached, and shattered tissue reformed instantly. The arm went from a broken, useless limb to a perfectly whole, pain-free one in under 2 seconds. Aizawa grunted in surprise, flexing his arm immediately. Midoriya, that was faster than Recovery Girl's quirk. The stamina drain is worth it, sensei, Izuku panted, already feeling the initial spike of fatigue. You are the foundation of defense here. The +1 temptation. As All Might arrived and engaged the Nomu, Izuku found himself acing the core ethical crisis of his quirk. The Nomu was a monstrosity, a creature designed through genetic engineering and torture. Its very existence was a tragedy. Izuku knew he could defeat it instantly. He could bypass its shock absorption entirely. Temptation. He could touch the Nomu and execute a massive, targeted temporal regression +1, reverting the creature's complex, engineered biology back to its raw base components, or even erase its quirk factor entirely. He could solve the problem instantly. He lunged toward the monster, his hand extended, the terrifying green flicker of the +1 energy already beginning to build. But the memories of the shrinking dog, the temporal headache, and Aizawa's warning flashed through his mind. The life you save must be the life you know. What if I accidentally rewind the Nomu out of existence? Izuku thought, shuddering. What if I rewind its complex biology into its base, tortured human form? I am not a judge. I am a healer and a stabilizer. Izuku slammed his hand not on the Nomu, but on the ground beside it. Strategic regression. A small, controlled +1 flicker instantly turned the concrete pavement into loose, shifting gravel, a state before compaction. The Nomu, caught mid-strike, momentarily lost its footing, throwing off its timing and allowing All Might a precious second to land a strategic blow. He chose restraint. He chose the 0-point hero role. Humor. Shigaraki's confusion. As All Might pummeled the momentarily destabilized Nomu, Shigaraki watched Deku furiously fixing the environment and healing the students. Kurogiri. Shigaraki scratched his neck violently. Why is this kid fixing the arena? Is this part of their strategy? Is he the structural hero? Grout. He's making everything clean. Kurogiri responded. His power is not destruction, Shigaraki Tamura. It is absolute restoration. He prevents damage from everlasting. He is a fundamental counter to our entire objective. Humor focus. Shigaraki, the self-proclaimed symbol of decay and destruction, was utterly baffled and annoyed by a hero who was essentially the symbol of maintenance. The battle concluded with All Might's victory. But Izuku's contribution was unique. He had healed the injured, solidified the structure, and neutralized the biggest threat through tactical environmental manipulation, all without resorting to the lethal potential of the +1. The USJ incident cemented Izuku's reputation not as a powerhouse, but as the one hero who could ensure that, no matter the damage, the fight would never truly end until the villain was apprehended. The UA Sports Festival was the ultimate public debut for the next generation of heroes. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a terrifying gauntlet. He had to demonstrate competence and control without ever revealing the true, reality-warping depths of his rewind +1. The scrutiny of the world. Before the events began, Izuku felt the intense scrutiny. Pro-heroes, international agencies, and, unknown to him, agents of the Shihasaikai were all watching. Izuku knew he couldn't use his power in the way Bakugo used explosions or Todoroki used ice. He couldn't make a spectacle of destruction. He had to be perfect, quiet, and relentless. His goal was simple: win through absolute, flawless endurance and strategic stabilization. The obstacle race, perfection in motion. The first event, the obstacle race, was a perfect test for his quirk. The terrain was chaotic, designed to inflict minor injuries and major fatigue. As the race started, Izuku focused his rewind internally. 1. The minefield. Izuku didn't disarm the mines. He ran at full speed, ignoring the potential blast damage. The moment a concussion threatened to rattle his bones or a scrape threatened his skin, he executed an instantaneous, micro-reset on the affected area. He was essentially running through a minefield with temporary invulnerability to non-lethal damage, as his body was constantly reverting to a state before impact. 2. 1. Observation from the stands. Midoriya is running like a machine. He's not even flinching. Present Mike screamed. Is his body just that tough? 2. 3. The fissures and trenches. As he jumped, his muscles strained, pushing his body past natural limits. Just as the burn of fatigue threatened to set in, he performed a 0-point reset on the specific muscle groups: quads, hamstrings, calves. He had zero fatigue, running with the freshness of a first step, mile after mile. 4. 5. The robot gauntlet. Unlike the entrance exam, he didn't risk the +1. Instead, he simply ran through the legs of the massive robots. As the metal scraped his shoulder, he reset the skin. When the ground crumpled, he reset the pavement just enough to maintain a stable footing. 6. He crossed the finish line in first place, not by speed, but by unbroken consistency and perfect endurance. He looked completely unruffled, not a drop of sweat or a hint of pain. Which only served to make his classmates, especially Bakugo, more infuriated. The cavalry battle, the unstoppable pillar. The second event, the cavalry battle, demanded teamwork and strategy. Izuku formed a team with Uraraka mobility, Tokiyami defense, and Hatsume make gear. His strategy revolved entirely around using himself as the unstoppable, unfatigable pillar of the team. The unbreakable base, Izuku carried the headbands, resting Uraraka and Hatsume on his back. Tokiyami's dark shadow provided defense. When an enemy team struck, Izuku's immediate response was not to counter, but to perform a 0-point reset on his own balance and core stability. No push, punch, or concussive force could genuinely upset his balance, as his muscles and center of gravity air constantly resetting to a state of perfect equilibrium. The gear repair, Hatsume's ingenious gadgets were constantly breaking under the stress of the fight. Every time a jet pack fizzled or a cable snapped, Izuku would slap the failing equipment with a quick 0-point rewind. The gear instantly snapped back to its factory new, flawless state, giving them a constant stream of functioning equipment. They were impossible to stop. They didn't win by force, but by sustainable, perfect stability. Humor focus. Hatsume, realizing the incredible potential, began intentionally veer stressing her equipment and pushing it past its limit. Reset. Reset. We need more lift, Izu-kun. She'd yell, treating him like a portable, magical repair drone. Izuku would grit his teeth, the massive stamina drain forcing him to reset the gear and his own resulting fatigue simultaneously. The standoff. The final moments of the cavalry battle saw a tense standoff with Todoroki's team. Todoroki launched a massive wave of ice. Izuku didn't fight the ice. He slapped the ground. Rewind. The ground beneath the ice instantly reset to its pre-frozen state, warm, unchilled asphalt. The ice sea was cut off from its frozen base and instantly shattered into harmless shards. Todoroki was stunned. He tried a massive fire attack. Izuku slapped his own forearm. Rewind. The painful heat was negated before it could even register as a burn. The battle ended in a stalemate, with Izuku's team managing to cling to their headbands through sheer, unyielding endurance, securing a place in the final bracket. The world watched, confused. Izuku Midoriya hadn't shown overwhelming power, he had shown perfect, effortless resilience. He was an anomaly, a hero who denied consequence. In the stands, a shadowy figure, one of Chisaki's subordinates, observed the green energy signature intently. This boy is the solution to the formula. The stable factor. We must acquire him before he realizes the full potential of his power. Izuku had successfully hidden the +1 from the public, but he had undeniably caught the attention of the man who needed it most. The final rounds of the sports festival began. Izuku Midoriya's reputation was cemented, the student who could not be tired and could not be damaged. His first match was against Shoto Todoroki, whose power, half cold, half hot, was overwhelming and elemental. The duel of elementals. The arena was set for the clash of fire and ice, but Izuku was neither. He was the 0 point, the negation of effect. Todoroki began with an immediate, massive wave of ice, intended to flash freeze the entire arena and overwhelm Izuku. Izuku stood his ground. He didn't use a +1 flicker on the arena floor, that would risk damaging the structural integrity and exposing his secret. Instead, he targeted the immediate air and moisture surrounding the ice. He activated a rapid, pulsed rewind. The effect was subtle but devastating. The air and moisture particles, moments before they froze, were reset to their pre-chilled, liquid state. The resulting heat differential instantly shattered the large, incoming ice sheet into harmless, disorganized powder that scattered like snow. Todoroki looked surprised. His attack hadn't been defeated by force, but by perfectly targeted physical reversal. "You're not breaking it," Todoroki stated, his voice flat. You're canceling the process of freezing. I am stabilizing the arena, Todoroki-kun, Izuku replied, panting slightly. The constant micro-resets to counter elemental forces drained more stamina than simple physical repair. Your power is too destructive for this environment. The fire test. Frustrated by the counter, Todoroki unleashed his fire side. A blistering inferno filled half the arena. Izuku reacted by immediately slapping his own exposed skin and hair. He didn't try to rewind the fire itself. He applied a continuous, internal 0-point reset on his skin cells and hair follicles. The intense heat still felt painful, but the cells were instantly reverting to their pre-burned state before any damage could register. He was literally resetting the micro-process of combustion on his own body. He stood in the heat, protected by a continuous, invisible shield of perfect health. You can't sustain that, Todoroki yelled, pushing more heat. Izuku was sweating profusely, the stamina drain immense. He was pushing his rewind to maintain absolute physical perfection against a catastrophic force. His mind screamed for him to use the +1 and rewind the flame back into its raw, unlit components. But he held back. 0 point. Only 0 point. The emotional collapse. Izuku knew he couldn't win by enduring a full power blast, and he couldn't stop Todoroki's will to destroy the arena. He had to win by strategy. Izuku suddenly ceased his internal self-resets. He intentionally allowed the intense heat to inflict minor fatigue and slight burns on his left arm. He flinched, showing genuine pain. Todoroki hesitated. Why are you stopping the reset? Are you at your limit? No, Izuku coughed, the smell of burnt skin filling the air. He looked Todoroki straight in the eye. I'm stopping because I realize I don't need to win by fighting your power. I need to win by fighting your fatigue. Izuku knew that Todoroki had been fighting all day, his muscles strained and his mind under pressure. The internal conflict over his father, Endeavor, was also an immense mental strain. Izuku rushed forward, closing the distance quickly, ignoring the pain that would soon be reset. He used a small, calculated 0-point rewind not on Todoroki's physical body, but on the concentrated exhaustion points in his opponent's shoulder and legs, the fatigue points from his previous matches. The fatigue vanished instantly. Todoroki felt a sudden, confusing surge of perfect health in his strained limbs. The jarring sensation, the sudden absence of the physical memory of fatigue, was a complete mental disorientation. He momentarily lost focus. The fire flickered, and the ice receded, confused by the sudden, unwanted healing. You've been fighting all day, Todoroki-kun, Izuku said softly. His own burned arm already resetting to perfect health. You are tired. You are mentally exhausted. Your power isn't the problem, your will is. The unwanted reset of his fatigue, coupled with Izuku's words, caused a profound mental disorientation. Todoroki wasn't defeated by power, but by the inversion of consequences. He stopped fighting, momentarily paralyzed by the loss of his physical memory of effort. Midnight declared the match. Izuku Midoriya wins. The aftermath and scrutiny. Izuku stumbled back, the stress of the fight and the near miss with the flame leaving him heavily fatigued. Despite the physical reset, he was the victor, but the crowd was confused. He had won by confusing his opponent's body and mind with unwanted perfection. He was terrifyingly manipulative without using any overt force. In the stands, the shadowy figure from the Shihasaikai was no longer just observing, he was actively reporting. The subject's quirk is not just healing or repair. It manipulates the physical memory of effort and consequence. It can induce a state of perfect, forced stability. This is the ultimate counter to the destructive power of our master. We must act soon. Izuku had secured his victory and his reputation for control, but the true consequence was that he had fully exposed the strategic depth of the rewind +1 to the very villains who sought to weaponize it. Following his sports festival victory, Izuku Midoriya was flooded with internship offers. He chose the agency of Manuel, the pro-hero known for his dedicated focus on rescue and disaster relief. Valuing precision and ethical control over flashiness, Izuku felt Manuel's methodical approach aligned perfectly with his 0-point hero philosophy. The mundane and the magnificent. Izuku's internship was focused on routine support missions, flood relief, stabilizing minor structural collapses, and administering first aid. His rewind quirk was, simply put, too good. During flood relief, he didn't need sandbags. He could touch the damaged section of the retaining wall and instantly restore the concrete to its perfect, uncracked state, sealing the breach in seconds. During a minor earthquake simulation, he could reset a damaged apartment building to flawless integrity faster than a construction crew could even assess the damage. On his first day, he encountered a victim with a broken wrist. He placed his hand on the injury, and the bone instantly clicked back into place, the tissue mended. The victim stared in awe. Recovery Girl's quirk took time and energy, Izuku's was instantaneous, albeit demanding the stamina to fuel the continuous reversal. The problem of effortless perfection. Stagnation. Manuel noticed that Izuku was achieving perfection without experiencing any real struggle or growth. His missions became routine, he was always successful, always perfect, but he was not adapting. His rewind buffer, allowing damage for analysis, was useless because the situations were too low stakes to cause meaningful damage. Ethical oversimplification. Izuku was relying on the reset to solve every physical problem, bypassing the need for complex problem solving. Why calculate the optimal beam reinforcement when you can simply rewind the faulty beam to perfection? Manuel called him into his office. Midoriya, your quirk is magnificent. You are the ultimate support hero. But I've noticed you are stagnating. Stagnating, sir? Izuku asked, confused. He was performing perfectly. You are fixing consequences, but you are not learning the process of failure. Manuel explained gently. A hero needs to understand momentum, structural fatigue, and the gradual wearing down of matter. Your quirk skips the lesson. You are becoming reliant on the reset to define your limits, instead of defining your limits yourself. Humor. The manual of Manuel. Manuel, a hero obsessed with procedure and forms, found his own agency thrown into chaos by Izuku's power. Izuku, trying to be helpful, used a minor rewind on a stack of disorganized intake forms, intending to reset them to a clean, organized state. He miscalculated the 0 point, and the forms reverted to blank sheets of paper. Erasing all the week's data. Humor focus. Manuel was reduced to tears, staring at the perfect, blank sheets. My data. My procedures. Midoriya, you are a blessing and a curse. You are too efficient. I spend half my day organizing, and you just undo it. Izuku realized his power demanded hyper-specificity. He had to intend to reset the organizational state of the papers, not their written state. It was a harsh, paperwork-based lesson in intentionality. The whispers of erasure. During his downtime, Izuku returned to his notebooks, now focusing on T. He single other quirk known to share his temporal manipulation properties, Overhaul's quirk disassembly and reassembly. He watched archival footage of the Yakuza boss's known capabilities. Overhaul could disassemble and reassemble matter with a touch, a power that acted like a destructive, chaotic +1. He could erase life or structure. Izuku realized his rewind was the perfect counter. Overhaul's destruction is an effect. Izuku's rewind is a reversal of effect. If Overhaul disassembles a body, Izuku could instantly 0 point reset the body to its prior state. But fear remained. What if Overhaul could disassemble the rewind energy itself? Izuku spent late nights practicing 0 point reset on complex electrical wires, forcing them back into a perfect circuit. While they were actively being cut and damaged, he had to be faster than the disassembly. He had to make the 0 point an instantaneous, almost passive response. He was training for an inevitable confrontation with the dark mirror of his own power, a confrontation where the stakes were not just a life, but the very stability of matter itself. He just didn't know how close that confrontation was. Izuku's internship with Manuel was interrupted by the news of the hero killer, Stain. The violence was escalating, forcing Izuku and Manuel to patrol the city of Hosu as emergency backup. The threat of Stain, a villain who targeted heroes he deemed unworthy, added a layer of fear and ethical complexity to the hero world. The immediate threat. The inevitable clash began when the hero killer cornered Tenya Iida, who was operating on a vengeful solo mission to find Stain after the attack on his brother, Tensai Ingenium. Izuku and Manuel responded to the distress signal. They found Stain, wielding his bloody katana, standing over the paralyzed Iida and a severely injured pro-hero, Native. You are not worthy of the title, hero, Stain rasped, his eyes burning with fanatic zeal. You are motivated by vengeance, not salvation. Stain lunged at Iida. Izuku reacted instantly, diving between Stain and Iida. He didn't use a powerful rewind, he used a strategic, minuscule one. He slammed his hand onto the blade of Stain's katana just before it struck. 0-point reset on the blade's edge. The sharp, honed edge of the katana momentarily reverted to a dull, sharpened state, its factory new, pre-honed 0-point. The blade still struck Izuku's side, but instead of a deep, cutting wound, it was a heavy, painful blunt impact. Stain, recognizing the bizarre effect, immediately licked the blood from the blunted blade before Izuku could reset the injury. Izuku felt the immediate onset of paralysis. Rewinding paralysis. Pinned to the ground, Izuku watched as Stain moved to finish Iida. Izuku couldn't move, but he could still use his rewind internally. He focused with desperate intensity on the chemical effect of the paralysis toxin coursing through his body. The quirk factor was incredibly difficult to rewind, as it was constantly being re-administered by the toxin itself. He didn't try to erase the toxin, he only targeted the effect it had on his body. He initiated a continuous, pulsed 0-point reset on his own nervous system's receptors. Every microsecond, the receptors were reverted to a state before they had been chemically blocked by the toxin. The paralysis flickered. Izuku could feel the block. Then the release, then the block again. He pushed more power, more stamina. Finally, the rewind overwhelmed the toxin's effect. Izuku surged to his feet, muscles snapping back into function. The effect was instantaneous. He broke free. How? Stain roared, shocked. I didn't break the paralysis, Stain, Izuku panted, already resetting the internal strain of the forced reversal. I simply reversed its consequence on my nerves. He slammed his hand onto Iida's chest. 0-point reset. Iida's paralysis vanished, and the strain from his rapid engines reset, leaving him confused but whole. The philosophy of flawlessness. The fight escalated, with Izuku using tactical rewinds to neutralize the immediate, life-threatening damage. He reset the CKS in the street to trip Stain and reset the structure of a broken fire hydrant to create a sudden, localized water spray. Stain was mesmerized by Izuku's power. You, the one who fixes everything. Stain lunged, katana flashing. You are the greatest hypocrite. You reverse consequences. You deny the very struggle that forges true character. Stain believed that heroes must carry the scars of their battles, the physical embodiment of their sacrifice. Izuku's power rendered that sacrifice meaningless. You would reverse death itself to maintain a lie. Stain shouted. Izuku confronted him. My power is to prevent consequence, not to deny it. Iida-kun's intent was wrong, but his life is still valuable. My mission is stability and salvage, not judgment. I am the 0-point hero, I ensure He Foundation is safe so that change can happen safely. The moral rewind. In the chaos, Iida, driven by his moral flaw, attempted to strike Stain, only to be neutralized again. Izuku had Stain pinned for a moment. His hand inches from the villain's face. He felt the terrifying surge of the +1 calling to him. Rewind him. Rewind his history. Rewind him back to before he was a killer, before the ideology took root. It was the ultimate temptation, the ability to rewind the causality of evil. Izuku flinched, pulling his hand back. He was not a moral arbiter of history. To use the +E on a person's life or history would risk destroying the entire timeline, let alone his own ethical code. Instead, Izuku focused his power on the environment, using a controlled +1 flicker to make the adjacent wall collapse, trapping Stain just long enough for the heroes to secure him. Stain was defeated, not by physical force, but by Izuku's ethical restraint and strategic manipulation of the environment. Izuku looked at the paralyzed, defeated villain. He had saved lives, but he had chosen to preserve the consequences of Stain's actions, the injuries to Native, the damage to Iida's reputation, as a lesson. Not as a reversible mistake. He was the 0-point hero, capable of resetting everything, yet choosing to reset almost nothing. This profound control was what made him both revered and feared. The incident in Hosu City was a media firestorm. The swift defeat of the hero killer, the near-miraculous healing of the victims, and the mysterious environmental manipulation used to secure the villain dominated every news cycle. Media confusion and public awe. The public was completely baffled by the instantaneous recovery of Iida and Native. Recovery Girl was quick to issue a statement, hinting at a highly specialized, rapid cellular restoration quirk, used by a UA student. Headline analysis. Oh, the God's quirk, whisper, the media began referring to the unidentified healing power as God's quirk, capable of reversing irreversible damage. This sensationalism was exactly what UA wanted to avoid, as it heightened the perceived value of the ability. Oh, the absence of wounds. What was most unsettling was the lack of scars. Iida and Native were perfectly restored, a profound difference from typical healing quirks. Deku's zero-point approach the concept of lasting physical consequence entirely. Oh, Izuku, forced to keep the specifics of his rewind a secret, felt the weight of the lie. He received commendation for his selflessness but faced internal criticism from Aizawa for the reckless use of the environmental +1 flicker to trap Stain. You risked temporal instability for a tactical advantage, Midoriya, Aizawa warned, his red eyes glaring. That flicker was too close to an over-regression. You were playing with reality itself for a simple takedown. Izuku, exhausted, merely nodded, recognizing the truth in the criticism. His ethical boundary was tested. And his desperation had caused him to briefly breach it. The Shihasaikai's final confirmation. Deep within the secluded base of the Shihasaikai Yakuza organization, Kai Chisaki Overhaul watched the news footage of the Hosu incident. Beside him, his right-hand man, Kuronohari Chronostasis analyzed the residual energy signature. Master, Chronostasis reported, his voice tight. The energy pattern is unmistakable. It is the signature of the unstable quirk factor, but perfectly harmonized and contained. The young UA hero is generating a stable temporal field for restoration. Chisaki, masked and cloaked in a chilling aura of anti-quirk obsession, slowly raised a hand, his touch capable of disassembling matter. The girl, Eri, is a destructive, runaway engine of that power. The hero, Midoriya, is the perfect, stable conductor, Chisaki mused. His quirk, his rewind +1, is the key to our entire operation. Chisaki's goal was to create and mass-produce quirk erasing bullets using Eri's power, but her quirk was too volatile, often destroying the serum itself. Midoriya's stable, amplified version was the missing component, the place. +1 would stabilize the erasure factor. He can heal the quirk factor to its 0 point. We need his genetic factor to ensure our bullets erase the quirk factor to its -1, complete non-existence, and maintain stability. Chisaki ordered. Shift the priority. Forget the League of Villains for now. We need the 0-point hero. The immediate threat of the League faded, replaced by the chilling, methodical pursuit of the Yakuza. Set up for the next arc. All Might, realizing the gravity of the threat, pulled Izuku aside. He revealed that his old sidekick, Sir Night Eye, had been tracking the Shihasaikai for months. Believing their operation was approaching a critical phase. The girl, Eri, she is the source of the instability, and Overhaul is using her, All Might confessed. Nig. HI's network believes that Overhaul is close to completing his quirk erasing weapons. Your quirk, young Midoriya, is either the only thing that can reverse that erasure, or it is the thing Overhaul will use to perfect it. Izuku looked down at his hands, the hands that could reset a city or rewind a person out of existence. His power was now the central variable in a fight for the existence of quirks themselves. He was no longer just a hero, he was a potential temporal weapon. The whispers of God's quirk were accurate, but the implications were far darker. Following the hero killer incident, Izuku Midoriya became acutely aware of the lingering side effects of his rewind +1. While the physical damage was instantly reset, the temporal instability associated with the +1 lingered like a phantom ache. The shimmering reality. Izuku began noticing anomalies after intense training sessions, moments where the physical world seemed to betray its own laws. He was practicing H's calculated erasure on a massive training dummy. He executed a perfect 0-point reset on the force of his punch, but the dummy, instead of being perfectly intact, momentarily appeared as a blur, a slight green shimmer passed over its surface, like heat haze. He blinked, and the dummy was solid again. What was that? Toshi-sensei asked, his eyes narrow. I think I saw a shimmer, Izuku admitted, looking at his hands. It was like the dummy was briefly existing in two different states at once, perfectly whole, but also slightly disintegrated. Toshi-sensei frowned. That's the temporal backlash we feared. When you use the rewind +1, even a tiny flicker, you are momentarily forcing the local spacetime to accept a contradiction. It causes reality to shimmer, as it fights to return to a singular, stable moment. Izuku realized the gravity of this. Every time he used the +1, he was not just fixing an object, he was creating a localized paradox. The more he used it, the more unstable his immediate environment became. This confirmed Aizawa's warning, his power threatened the timeline. The green energy trail. This led to Izuku's most important discovery about his quirk's cost, the green energy trail. After a particularly exhausting session of self-resets, Izuku noticed a faint, almost invisible green energy trail emanating from his fingertips every time he activated his quirk. It was subtle, like a ghost of light fading after half a second. This trail was the residual rewind +1 factor, the physical manifestation of his quirk's unique genetic components being expended. It was his signature, his footprint on the fabric of reality. He meticulously documented this in volume 16 of his notebook, labeling it the plus factor echo. Hypothesis: this echo is not just energy. It is the unique genetic information that allows his rewind to be stable and amplifiable +1. Danger: if a quirk analyst could collect and decode this energy, they could understand the -1, the secret to complete erasure. Izuku doubled down on his control, practicing containing the green trail, forcing his rewind to be as silent and localized as possible. Humor: the scrambled dinner. The lingering temporal energy sometimes caused hilarious, yet concerning, domestic incidents. One evening, Inko Midoriya was making Izuku's favorite dish, katsudon. Izuku was sitting at the table, still recovering from an intense training session and fighting a mild temporal headache. As Inko cracked an egg into the pan, the lingering +1 echo from Izuku's nearby presence interacted with the rapidly cooking egg. Instead of cooking normally, the egg instantly rewound its state, not to a raw egg, but to a raw, unbroken egg still in its shell. The shell and the egg matter, having been briefly separated, snapped back together with a sharp pop, sending the egg soaring into the ceiling. Humor focus: Inko stared, clutching the empty halves of the original shell. My baby, did you just rewind my dinner back into its packaging? Izuku stammered an apology, rushing to clean the egg from the ceiling. He realized his power was so sensitive that he had to suppress it even when near basic chemical changes like cooking. The Night Eye arrangement. Later that week, All Might confirmed the arrangement. Izuku, along with a select few, would intern under Sir Night Eye, All Might's former sidekick and a master strategist. Night Eye is obsessed with ensuring the proper future, Toshi-sensei explained. He has foreseen a disaster involving the Hasaikai and the quirk erasing bullets. Your quirk, young Midoriya, is the only one with the potential to rewrite that terrible future through zero-point intervention. Izuku knew this was it. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was the vital, ethical, and dangerous zero-point variable in the ultimate temporal paradox, the hero whose power could either save existence or unravel it entirely. Izuku Midoriya reported to the Sir Night Eye agency, accompanied by Mirio Tagata, Lemillion, and Ochako Uraraka, who were also starting their work studies there. The agency was quiet, meticulously organized, and intensely focused. Night Eye's demand for control. Sir Night Eye, a tall, stoic man with unnervingly sharp eyes, immediately fixed his gaze on Izuku. His quirk, foresight, allowed him to see a person's entire future for 1 hour upon touching them. He had already used it on Izuku years ago, and the sight had been chaotic. Midoriya, Night Eye stated without preamble, his voice cold and analytical. Your power is a temporal paradox. It is the ability to edit reality, and it is a danger to the timeline itself. He pulled up a digital rendering of the energy signature Izuku had left behind on the zero-pointer wreckage, the plus factor echo. When you use the +1, you are creating a point of instability, Night Eye explained. I've seen the futures that stem from that instability. Why? Futures where the timeline unravels in localized bursts, where cause and effect cease to function. It is a disaster far greater than any villain. Night Eye's demand was absolute. You are here to gain absolute zero-point control. You will never, under any circumstances, use the +1 on anything biological or on the environment. Your quirk must become a predictable, perfect state reset tool, nothing more. The Foresight Paradox. Night Eye then revealed the chilling purpose of his agency, to stop the coming disaster involving Kai Chisaki, Overhaul, and the girl, Eri. I have foreseen AF. Future where Chisaki completes his quirk erasing bullet, Night Eye revealed, his eyes grave. I have also foreseen the catastrophic failure of the heroes to stop him, leading to the erasure of countless quirks. But, he looked directly at Izuku. I see your rewind is the only variable that can actively rewrite that future. You are the counter-force to erasure. You are the 0 point that can restore what he takes. The pressure on Izuku was immense. He wasn't just fighting a villain, he was fighting a predetermined fate. His quirk, the ability to reset reality, was the ultimate weapon against inevitability. The training of constraint. Night Eye subjected Izuku to grueling exercises designed to test his restraint and precision. One exercise involved rapidly assembling and disassembling a complicated mechanism, then using rewind to bring it back to its perfect, working state, all while his senses were being overloaded. If you accidentally push the +1, you risk reverting the metal components back to raw ore, collapsing the entire system. Night Eye warned. Izuku learned to visualize the 0 point as a literal mental dial that he could only allow to reach 10, for a perfect state reset, never 11 feet. Which was the start of temporal regression. The mental exhaustion was worse than any physical fatigue. Mirio, witnessing the intensity of Izuku's training, was in awe of the control required. Your power is insane, Midoriya. I just phase through things, you practically unhappen them. Humor. The paperwork test. Night Eye also tested Izuku's ability to focus his rewind amid mundane details. Using the agency's infamous and endless paperwork, Night Eye handed Izuku a stack of crumpled, ink-smeared reports. Reset these documents to their perfect, signed, and approved state. Do not reset the ink. Only the paper's physical state. If you rewind the ink, you rewind the approval. Izuku focused, managing to iron out every wrinkle and remove every smear, leaving the ink pristine and untouched. It was a perfect display of selective 0-point reset. Humor focus. Later, a distracted Izuku accidentally touched a small section of a legal document Night Eye was signing. He meant to reset a stray smudge of coffee, but slightly miscalculated the 0 point. The signature's line weight reverted to a thinner, earlier draft of the signature, forcing Night Eye to waste another hour to redo the paperwork. Night Eye gave him a glare that could have withered crops. Midoriya, Night Eye said, his voice a low threat. If you ever compromise a legal document again, I will reset your career before it begins. The training under Night Eye confirmed the horrifying truth. Izuku's quirk was an asset, but his lack of control was an existential threat. He had to become the all-time stable variable to save the future. The work-study patrol was supposed to be routine. Izuku, alongside Mirio Tagata, was patrolling a secluded, older district of the city, keeping an eye out for any Shihasaikai activity. As advised by Night Eye, the pressure of maintaining the 0 point at all times was exhausting, and Izuku was deep in thought, reviewing his mental control dial. The shadowy encounter. They were passing a quiet corner when a chillingly controlled voice stopped them. Excuse me, young heroes. You seem to be in a rush. Emerging from the alley was Kai Chisaki, Overhaul. He was dressed in his signature dark suit, a plague mask obscuring his face. Clutched tightly to his side, looking small and utterly terrified, was a little girl with long, pale hair, Eri. Izuku's blood ran cold. He instantly recognized the girl from Night Eye's analysis, the source of the unstable rewind power. Eri, seeing the heroes, immediately broke free from Chisaki's grip and ran, hiding behind Izuku's legs. She was shaking violently, her silent terror more palpable than any scream. Please, Eri whispered, clutching Izuku's trousers. Don't let him take me back. Izuku and Mirio exchanged a look of alarm. Mirio, the ever-composed hero, stepped forward. We're just on patrol, sir. Is there a problem here? Chisaki smiled thinly behind his mask, his eyes like ice. No problem at all. Just a child who sometimes gets a bit rambunctious. She tends to scrape herself quite often. He gestured toward Eri's visible bandages. The temporal instability. Izuku knew he couldn't Saint use a 0-point reset on Eri to heal her injuries. Night Eye's command was absolute: never use rewind on a living creature unless absolutely necessary for survival. He didn't want to risk the +1 instability on her fragile young body. But as Eri clung to him, terrified, the quirk factor within her, the volatile, destructive rewind, reacted to the presence of Izuku's stable, powerful rewind +1. A localized, violent temporal shudder hit them. The air around the three of them, Izuku, Eri, and Chisaki, seemed to compress and distort. Izuku's vision blurred violently, and he heard a loud, searing temporal noise in his ears. A sound like reality tearing. The buildings around them shimmered violently with the green +1 echo, almost collapsing under the contradictory temporal pressure. Eri screamed, a raw, non-vocal sound of power. Chisaki recoiled, stumbling back a step, clearly feeling the intense, unstable reaction between the two similar quirks. Your energy, Chisaki hissed, his eyes narrowed. Staring not at the hero, but at the shimmering air. It's the perfect stabilizer. The plus factor is active. The brief, intense feedback loop was enough to confirm Chisaki's suspicions: Izuku was the key. Strategic retreat and missed opportunity. Mirio, sensing the temporal danger and the profound threat, put his hand on Izuku's shoulder, using his sheer strength to pull him away from Eri. We don't want any trouble, Mirio stated, forcing a light tone despite the obvious tension. Apologies for the inconvenience. Chisaki, having regained his composure, pulled Eri back to his side with a rough grasp. The temporal instability immediately subsided as the two similar quirk factors were physically separated. Smart boy, Chisaki noted, his voice regaining its chilling control. No trouble at all. Let's go, Eri. As Chisaki walked away, Eri looked back at Izuku with a look of desperate, profound sorrow, her eyes silently pleading for rescue. Izuku was left shaking, his head throbbing with a severe temporal headache. He knew he had just missed his chance. He had chosen to obey Night Eye's restraint, 0-point only, and it had cost him the opportunity to save the girl. We couldn't have engaged, Midoriya, Mirio said gravely. The second those quirks reacted, the entire street was close to collapsing. You saw the shimmer. We would have risked erasing the whole block. Izuku knew the truth. His quirk was so powerful, and so mirrored by the girls, that the simple act of them touching could destabilize the entire timeline. The Dark Mirror. Back at the agency, Izuku reported the encounter, detailing the violent reaction between the two quirks. Night Eye slammed his fist on the table. He knows now. He felt the stability of your power against the chaos of hers. He will pursue you relentlessly. Night Eye provided a deeper analysis of Overhaul's quirk, disassembly and reassembly. Chisaki's power is a destructive, chaotic -1, the ability to revert matter to its base. Unusable state. Yours is the restorative, ethical 0-point. But the potential for temporal regression in your +1 is what he seeks to stabilize his erasure factor. Izuku's realization was complete. The villain wasn't just after the girl, he was after Izuku's genetic factor to perfect a weapon that could erase quirks, and Izuku's rewind was the only power that could reverse the irreversible damage the weapon would inflict. The fight to save Eri had become a race to save the entire quirk factor from permanent, stabilized erasure. The atmosphere at the Sir Night Eye agency was tense, galvanized by the close encounter. Izuku, Mirio, and the pro-heroes, Night Eye, Fat Gum, and Rock Lock, gathered for a crisis meeting. The focus was on the two similar, yet opposing, temporal quirks, Eri's unstable rewind and Izuku's rewind +1. The paradox explained. Sir Night Eye, utilizing his extensive quirk analysis database and the energy signature collected during Izuku's extreme +1 usage on the 0-pointer, finally explained the profound connection between the two powers. Eri's power, Night Eye began, displaying a chaotic, swirling energy graphic, is a raw, unstable form of temporal regression. She can rewind living matter to any prior state, infancy, non-existence, but she cannot control the 0-point. Her quirk is essentially a constantly running, untuned -1. He then showed Izuku's energy signature, a perfectly controlled, contained green sphere. Yours, Midoriya, is the stable, self-regulating version. The +1 is the evolutionary factor that allows you to define and hold the 0-point, the perfect state. You are the only person known to naturally possess a power that can achieve a perfect state reset without causing temporal chaos. This confirmed Chisaki's pursuit. Chisaki believes that by studying the girl's chaotic power, he can create a destructive weapon, Fat Gum interjected, tapping the table with a gloved finger. But her power is too volatile. It destroys the serum and the bullets. He needs Midoriya's plus factor echo, the genetic key to stability, to perfect his quirk erasing serum. Izuku realized his true role. He was not just the rescuer, he was the stabilizing variable that Overhaul desperately needed to achieve his terrifying goal of permanent quirk erasure. The nullification strategy. The hero's ultimate strategy was built around Izuku's unique quirk. Our mission is twofold, Night Eye stated. First, rescue Eri. Second, neutralize the quirk erasing bullets that Overhaul has developed. Night Eye looked at Izuku. Midoriya, you are our counter agent. If a hero is struck by one of these bullets, they will lose their quirk. The effect is irreversible, unless you can rewind the damage. Izuku grasped the strategy immediately. If I can apply a 0-point reset to the struck hero, I should be able to revert their body back to the state before the bullet's chemical component took hold, effectively restoring their quirk factor. The cost, however, would be immense. Rewinding the effect of a concentrated quirk erasing drug would demand a massive, highly focused expenditure of rewind energy. Bordering on the +1 danger zone. Humor, the weight of expectations. The sheer pressure of the situation weighed heavily on the young heroes. Mirio, in an attempt to lighten the mood, tried to demonstrate his phasing quirk, only to get stuck halfway through a wall. Izuku instinctively reached out, about to apply a 0-point reset to Mirio's stuck arm. Mirio shouted, "No, Midoriya, don't reset my arm, I need to learn to phase out of this. If you fix it, I'll never know the consequence." Humor focus. Night Eye, sighing deeply, simply stamped a piece of paper. "Midoriya, go to the break room. Your presence is an existential threat to learning through failure." Izuku walked away, feeling the familiar, absurd irony of his power. He was the ultimate rescuer, yet he was constantly being told not to use his quirk. Final preparation. The joint operation with multiple pro-hero agencies was officially sanctioned. Izuku knew that the moment they breached the Shihasaikai headquarters, he would be the primary target. He spent his final hours of training running through complex 0-point resets on multiple organic targets, rescuing practice dummies while simultaneously healing minor tears in his own uniform. He had to be fast enough to counter Overhaul's destructive touch and precise enough to save anyone struck by the quirk-erasing bullets. His control dial for the +1 was locked down. But he knew in the chaos of battle, that lock might snap. The joint operation was massive, involving Sir Night Eye, Fat Gum, Rock Lock, Aizawa, and a coalition of pro-heroes. Along with the student interns Izuku, Mirio, and Uraraka. The target was the highly fortified underground compound of the Shihasaikai. Breaching the defenses. The raid commenced with swift, overwhelming force. The heroes breached the perimeter, navigating a complex web of booby traps and Yakuza underlings. Izuku, wearing a modified hero costume reinforced for stability, was positioned near the rear. Alongside Aizawa and Mirio, acting as the designated stabilization unit and the last line of defense against any quirk erasing effects. Their first obstacle was a massive, concrete maze created by the Yakuza's earth manipulating quirks. The walls shifted, the floor cracked, and the heroes risked being separated or crushed. Izuku immediately went to work. He wasn't focused on fighting the villains. He was fighting the destruction itself. He placed his hands on the shifting ground and initiated a continuous, widespread 0-point reset on the entire corridor's structure. Crumbling concrete instantly snapped back to its original, perfect state. The shifting walls froze. "I'm keeping the integrity of the corridor," Izuku yelled, his voice strained from the massive energy cost. "Go. The villains can't damage the structure faster than I can repair it." Izuku became the unmoving anchor of the operation, ensuring the path remained stable for the advancing heroes. Aizawa, watching, nodded in approval. This was the precise, ethical application of the 0-point hero principle. The quirk-canceling paradox. Deep within the tunnels, they encountered Shin Nemoto, one of Chisaki's subordinates. Armed with a prototype quirk-erasing bullet gun, Nemoto fired, aiming directly at Fat Gum. The bullet struck the pro-hero's shoulder. Fat Gum stumbled, and his mass absorption quirk flickered violently. He felt a searing, unnatural drain on his energy. It hit. My quirk is fading. Fat Gum roared, clutching his shoulder. Aizawa immediately rushed Nemoto, but Izuku was faster. He launched himself toward Fat Gum, placing his hand firmly on the bullet's impact site. He didn't have time for a careful 0-point reset. He focused maximum rewind energy, aiming to reverse the chemical process of the bullet's drug factor within the wound. The energy flared intensely, momentarily breaching the safety of the 0-point and sending a dangerous +1 flicker through Fat Gum's body. The wound instantly sealed, the erased quirk factor snapping back into existence, accompanied by a sharp, disorienting pain for Fat Gum. It worked. But that was jarring. Fat Gum exclaimed, his mass absorption quirk roaring back to life. Izuku felt the familiar, debilitating temporal headache, the cost of forcing a biological system to undo a chemical consequence. He had successfully countered the erasure. But he was operating on borrowed time. The humorous strategy. As the heroes proceeded, they faced a hallway filled with complex tripping mechanisms. Aizawa, exhausted from fighting the lower-tier villains, tripped over a loose wire. Before he could fall, Izuku, almost reflexively, placed a hand on the wire and reset its tension to the perfect, slack state it was in before it was set up as a trap. Aizawa, suddenly untripped, caught himself. He stared at Izuku. Midoriya, Aizawa sighed, his voice tired but appreciative. You just saved me from a concussion. But you also reset the villain's tactical data. They won't know if that trap worked or if it was never there. Humor focus. I am merely returning the environment to its optimal, non-hazardous state, sensei, Izuku replied. Trying to sound professional, while secretly delighted he'd been able to save his mentor from a graceless tumble. The heroes continued their descent, relying on Izuku's power to maintain their structural and physical integrity, creating an impossible scenario for the Yakuza. Every setback was instantly reversed, every tactical advantage was nullified by the 0-point hero. The structural integrity of the main tunnels was maintained by Izuku's continuous 0-point reset field, but the deeper they went, the more fragmented the complex became. The Yakuza began using quirks to distort space and create labyrinthine corridors, aiming to separate and confuse the heroes. The separation and the race. The main hero group was split. Mirio Tagata, using his superior permeation quirk, was designated to press ahead toward the center, where Night Eye's foresight had located Eri. Izuku, Aizawa, and the others continued to fight their way through, relying on Aizawa's erasure to suppress enemy quirks and Izuku's rewind to neutralize environmental hazards. They were suddenly confronted by a powerful subordinate who could manipulate the walls and ceilings, attempting to seal them off. I can keep resetting the walls to their base state, but the temporal cost is getting too high, sensei. Izuku yelled, pressing his hands against a crumbling archway. The Araru ND him was faintly shimmering with the +1 echo. Then your path is clear, Midoriya. Aizawa commanded, his eyes red as he erased the wall manipulator's quirk. Mirio is the fastest. You go with him. If you can reach Eri. You are the only one who can stabilize her power. We will hold the line here. Izuku nodded, trusting Aizawa. He used a quick 0-point reset on his own legs and lungs, an instant burst of perfect energy, and phased through the stabilized archway, catching up to the rapidly advancing Mirio. The face of despair. Izuku and Mirio plunged deeper, navigating a confusing, dark staircase. Mirio, whose quirk allowed him to permeate matter, was the perfect guide, phasing them past traps and sealed doors. They finally burst into a large, central chamber. And there she was. Eri. She was standing near a bizarre makeshift laboratory setup, her face pale, her horn trembling slightly, radiating a faint, erratic version of the rewind energy. She was the epicenter of Aloka. List temporal instability, a visible ripple in the air around her. Standing guard was Kai Chisaki Overhaul, flanked by his two most loyal subordinates, Chronostasis and Mimic, the one manipulating the corridors. Chisaki held a syringe containing a swirling, purple-green liquid, the final, volatile version of the quirk-erasing serum. Chisaki looked at Izuku, his eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. The 0-point hero. You're late. I was just about to find a way to extract your plus factor echo without too much structural damage. The clash of paradoxes. Chisaki looked from Eri to Izuku. Look at her, hero. She is chaos. She is the raw, unrefined engine of -1, the destructive erasure of quirks. But you, he pointed at Izuku, you are the answer. You are the stable, self-regulating +1. Together, you are the perfect weapon, absolute erasure, perfectly controlled. Chisaki lunged for Eri, intending to inject the volatile serum. Mirio reacted instantly, tackling Chisaki. Chronostasis immediately engaged Mirio, trying to slow him down with his time quirk. Izuku moved to intercept Chisaki. Their paths converged near Eri. As Izuku and Chisaki brushed past each other, the two opposing temporal energies, rewind +1 and disassembly, reassembly, clashed violently. A searing, painful feedback loop hit Izuku. He felt the sickening, momentary sensation of his own bod. Why being disassembled, Chisaki's power, and then instantly reset, Izuku's own quirk, all in the span of a millisecond. The force was so immense that Izuku stumbled, his vision swimming, his stamina plummeting. The exchange left a visible temporal scar on the stone floor, a small section of the rock that instantly turned to dust and then reformed perfectly, repeating the process in a rapid, nauseating loop until Izuku forced his power to stabilize. Chisaki, too, was forced back, clutching his arm, which felt momentarily dissolved. Such potent stability. You will be mine. The final stakes. Mirio, having dispatched chronostasis, faced Chisaki. But then, a flash of purple-green light, Chisaki's subordinate, Kurono, managed to fire a shot from the prototype quirk erasing gun. The bullet struck Mirio in the arm. Mirio froze, his permeation quirk instantly vanishing. He fell through the floor, saved only by his quick reflexes. He surfaced, looking horrified. My quirk, it's gone. Izuku stared at his friend, the hero who was supposed to save Eri, now completely quirkless. Chisaki smiled. Now, hero, you face a choice. Fight me, and risk your own power's instability, or use rewind on your friend and waste your energy. Either way, the little girl is mine. The final battle had begun. Izuku Midoriya, the 0-point hero, stood alone against the destructive force of Overhaul. Facing the choice between saving his friend and saving the future of all quirks. The cavernous laboratory felt dangerously small. Mirio, now quirkless, clutched his shoulder, disbelief etched across his face. Overhaul, having proven the terrible effectiveness of his bullets, advanced toward Eri. Izuku Midoriya stood as the sole barrier, the only counter-agent capable of stabilizing the temporal threat. A simple choice, hero. Overhaul sneered, raising his hand, which pulsed with dark energy. Save your friend, or save the girl. Either way, you divert your energy from me. Izuku didn't hesitate. He knew the priority. Mirio's quirk was gone, but his life was not in immediate danger. Eri's life, and the future of the quirk factor, was. Izuku raced toward Overhaul, placing a desperate, focused hand on Mirio's injured arm as he passed. 0-point reset. He poured a concentrated burst of rewind energy into the wound. The chemical components of the quirk erasing bullet were reversed, and the suppressed quirk factor in Mirio snapped back. Mirio gasped, feeling the sudden, jarring return of his permeation quirk. Go, Mirio. Get Eri out of here. I will hold the 0-point. Izuku yelled, the massive stamina drain leaving him momentarily wobbly. Mirio, understanding the enormous sacrifice, nodded gravely. He phased through the ground to create a distraction, forcing Overhaul to split his focus. The temporal duel. Izuku faced Overhaul. This was a battle not of strength, but of causality. Overhaul lunged, touching the floor. Disassemble. The stone beneath Izuku's feet instantly dissolved into a chaos of dust and raw components, meant to drop Izuku into the abyss. Izuku slammed his hand onto the collapsing dust. Rewind. The 0-point snapped back, and the dust immediately recoalesced, hardening back into perfectly solid, seamless stone. You can't defeat me, boy. Overhaul roared, rapidly touching the walls, creating grotesque spikes and destroying the ceiling. I am the power of -1. I reduce existence to nothing. And I am the 0-point. Izuku countered, running, touching every dissolving structure, instantly reversing the destruction. I bring it back to its perfect state. I deny your consequence. Izuku's stamina was draining rapidly. Overhaul could touch far faster than Izuku could run and reset. He was being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of destruction. The nullification realization. Izuku realized his defense was flawed. He was reacting to Overhaul's quirk. He had to be preemptive. He focused a massive, continuous rewind Eld on a 3-meter radius around his own body. He was creating a rewind buffer, a continuous temporal field that instantly reset any damage within it. Overhaul touched the field. Izuku's rewind class. Head directly with Overhaul's disassemble. The two powers, perfectly matched in their ability to manipulate matter at the base level, created a silent, violent spatial contraction. Overhaul could disassemble the object. But Izuku's continuous field instantly reset the object before the disassembly could finalize. It's a stalemate. Overhaul hissed, his hand recoiling from the temporal friction. You can't touch me. And I can't touch you without risking a chain reaction. Izuku had secured a small bubble of absolute stability, but he was consuming his stamina at an exponential rate simply to maintain the field. He was the perfect support pillar, but now he had to find an offensive strategy. Humor. The structural complaint. As the battle raged, the remaining subordinate, Mimic, who was manipulating the corridors to separate the heroes, grew frustrated. Mimic. Stop. Stop damaging the structure. I can't keep track of the passages if the walls keep resetting. Izuku, strained, then stop changing them. I am simply stabilizing the environment to its optimal, pre-manipulated state. Overhaul, furious, silence. He's using the 0 point to mock my control. Humor focus. The scene descended into a structural engineer's nightmare. Overhaul trying to destroy the foundation, Izuku perfectly repairing it, and Mimic complaining about the maintenance workload. Mirio, having secured Eri, saw Izuku holding the line but clearly fading. He knew Izuku couldn't maintain the 0 point field for long. Izuku had to end this. Izuku looked at the unstable temporal barrier between them. He realized the only way to beat Overhaul was to use a move so fast, so unpredictable, that Overhaul's reaction time couldn't disassemble the effect. He had to use the ultimate danger, the +1. Izuku Midoriya stood locked in a desperate temporal duel with Overhaul. His continuous rewind field kept the floor and walls perfectly stable, preventing Overhaul from using his disassembly quirk to trap him. But maintaining the field was rapidly draining Izuku's stamina. You are fading, hero. Overhaul taunted, his hand hovering outside the shimmering green field. I can wait. Your power is finite, mine is absolute. When you collapse, I will take your quirk factor and perfect my bullets. The critical flaw. Izuku knew he was right. The rewind +1 was powered by his biological energy. He couldn't hold the 0 point indefinitely. He had to create an offensive move that was so fast, so complete, that Overhaul couldn't disassemble the effect before it took hold. He looked at Eri, who was now safely behind Mirio but still trembling, radiating faint bursts of chaotic energy. He looked at Mirio, whose return to quirk function was proof that rewind could overcome erasure. Izuku, you realized the solution wasn't to target Overhaul's body, that was too dangerous and risked the disastrous temporal regression to aging. The solution was to target the one thing that both Overhaul's power and his own rewind were fundamentally about, the quirk factor. The +1 assault. Izuku suddenly dropped his defensive rewind field. He took a massive, gasping breath, ignoring the sudden paw in of Overhaul instantly shattering the floor near his feet. He channeled all his remaining power, pushing the rewind dial past the ethical 0 point and directly into the terrifying +1 territory. He aimed his outstretched hand not at Overhaul's skin, but at the plague mask covering his face, the physical item that contained his constantly active quirk factor. Rewind +1, factor regression. The +1 energy, violent and raw, erupted in a blinding, chaotic green pulse. It wasn't designed to destroy the mask, it was designed to over-rewind the object's relationship to the active quirk factor. The effect was horrifyingly instantaneous. 1. Temporal regression. The mask didn't turn to dust, it reversed its state to the point before it was saturated with Overhaul's quirk factor. 2. 3. Factor severance. The act of over-rewinding the mask created a temporary, violent temporal contradiction that momentarily severed Overhaul's physical connection to his quirk factor. 4. Overhaul gasped, staggering backward. His hand, which had been generating disassembly energy, suddenly felt cold and inert. He could still touch, but the chaotic -1 power was gone. He was momentarily quirkless. My quirk. You severed it. Overhaul shrieked, clutching the inert hand. The cost and the scramble. Izuku collapsed, the entire world swimming in a nauseating green haze. The temporal backlash was immediate and brutal. His memories scrambled violently, he couldn't remember his own name, only the chilling feeling of pushing reality to the breaking point. A massive, painful temporal headache threatened to shatter his consciousness. The cost was immense, but the opportunity was clear. Mirio, seeing Overhaul's sudden vulnerability, rushed in, grabbing Eri and phasing out through the floor, shouting. Go! Go! Izuku, using a final, desperate zero-point reset on his own brain, forcing his memories and consciousness back to a stable state, dragged himself forward. He slammed his hands onto the floor where Overhaul had fallen, initiating a massive structural zero-point reset, instantly rebuilding the stone around the dazed villain, trapping him beneath tons of seamless, perfectly repaired concrete. Izuku had won the immediate battle, not by force, but by temporal surgery, using the +1 to surgically sever the villain's link to his own power long enough to neutralize him. The aftermath and Dark Omen. The remaining heroes rushed into the chamber, securing the quirkless, enraged Overhaul beneath the perfectly sealed stone. Eri was safe, but the victory was marred by the sheer exhaustion and temporal instability radiating from Izuku. Aizawa secured Izuku immediately, seeing the faint, erratic green shimmer surrounding his body. He used the +1. His quirk is unstable. As they dragged the unconscious Izuku out of the collapsing compound, the camera focused on the temporal scar Izuku had left on the floor, a small section of stone that was locked into a loop of continuous, chaotic creation and destruction. It was a physical reminder that Izuku's power, while saving the day, was a constant threat to the fundamental laws of existence. The victory against the Shihasaikai was hailed as a massive win for the pro-heroes. Overhaul was neutralized, Eri was safe, and the imminent threat of the quirk erasing bullets was contained. However, the price was high. Mirio had been quirkless for a short, harrowing period, and Izuku Midoriya was dangerously compromised. The exhaustion and the scars. Izuku was confined to Recovery Girl's infirmary, not for injury, but for temporal exhaustion. His body, having been instantly healed by his own quirk, was physically perfect, but his brain and quirk factor were reeling from the massive, destabilizing use of the +1 to sever Overhaul's quirk connection. The temporal headaches were constant now, accompanied by frightening flashes of scrambled memories and the persistent, low-level green shimmer around his hands. Recovery Girl was baffled. I can heal the damage, dear, but I can't heal the time differential. You forcibly rewound a fundamental aspect of reality. Your quirk factor is in shock. Sir Night Eye, severely injured but recovering, summoned Izuku. You saved the future, Midoriya, but you risked the timeline itself. The +1 is not a weapon, it is an existential crisis. Your control must be absolute. The world saw a miraculous victory, but we saw how close you came to total collapse. Izuku, humbled, realized he hadn't mastered his power, he had merely survived using it. His focus shifted entirely from fighting villains to achieving internal, unshakable stability. Foreshadowing the greater war, the world's attention was on the Yakuza takedown, but Aizawa and All Might knew a larger, darker shadow was growing. The Paranormal Liberation Front War, PLFW, the unification of the League of Villains and Destro's former army, was imminent. Shigaraki's power is decay, ultimate destruction. All Might warned Izuku during a private visit. Your power is ultimate restoration. You are the perfect counter, young Midoriya. But if you are compromised by instability, you'll be useless. Izuku's role in the coming war would not be as a frontline fighter, but as the strategic, irreplaceable support pillar. 1. Mass stabilization, using widespread zero-point reset to instantly repair cities and hospitals destroyed by decay. 2. 3. Hero preservation, using targeted rewind to instantly heal any hero on the brink of death or permanent injury. 4. 5. Ethical barrier, acting as the living, ethical wall against Shigaraki's total annihilation. 6. The irony was not lost on Izuku. The greatest crisis in hero history was approaching, and his primary mission was restraint and maintenance. Humor, the scrambled notebooks. The lingering temporal instability caused one final, humorous incident before the major conflict began. Izuku, trying to organize his notes for the war, Found that the plus factor echo from his hands had affected the paper of his most recent notebook, volume 17. He opened it, and the last page he'd written on, detailing his quirk strategy, had rewound itself. The ink had vanished, and the fibers of the paper had reset to a blank, clean state. Frantically, he flipped through the entire volume. Half the pages were pristine, devoid of writing. His notes had been partially rewound out of existence. Humor focus. He burst into the staff room, holding the blank notebook. Sensei. My quirk, it ate my homework. It reset the ink. I have no notes for the war. Aizawa didn't even lift his head from his stack of paperwork. Then you must rely on your memory, Midoriya. The one thing your quirk can't entirely erase, yet. Now, go, and stabilize. Izuku was dispatched to a secluded training facility, tasked with one thing, achieving complete, absolute, unshakable stability, locking the +1 away forever, before the final war began. Izuku's training regimen, overseen remotely by Aizawa and All Might, became one of isolation, meditation, and relentless internal conflict. He wasn't training to get stronger. He was training to become perfectly inert. His goal was to achieve a state where the rewind +1 was permanently locked away, leaving him only with the stable, ethical 0-point reset. The meditation of zero. Izuku's training focused on mental visualization. He would sit, meditating, while All Might projected complex, chaotic images onto the walls, symbols of decay, destruction, and temporal instability. Izuku's task was to mentally touch each image and instantly revert it to a state of perfect stillness, the 0 point. He had to be able to instantly recognize the boundary between 0 point, the flawless, stable, intended state, e.g., a whole apple, +1, the destructive, reality-altering regression, e.g., an apple seed or raw atoms. He learned to associate the +1 with a painful, internal red light, and the 0 point with a calming, stable blue light. He would not activate his quirk if the internal sensor flashed red. You must make stability an absolute reflex, Midoriya. Aizawa's voice crackled over the comms. No hesitation. No emotion. The future depends on your self-imposed limitations. The costly test, to truly test his control, is. Uku devised a grueling physical exercise, the controlled collapse. He would run on a treadmill at maximum speed until every muscle fiber screamed in pain and fatigue. At the exact moment his muscles reached their breaking point, he had to perform a selective 0-point reset on only the muscle tissue, leaving the fatigue and memory of the struggle intact. Failure 1. He reset too much, exceed. Entirely erasing the memory of the fatigue, leading to a dizzying temporal headache. +1 slip. Failure 2. He reset too little, and the accumulated physical pain momentarily overwhelmed his focus, causing him to stumble. 0.2 weak. He repeated this for 12 hours until the 0-point reset became instantaneous, silent, and entirely contained. He could feel the same moment of physical failure and immediately hit the internal blue light, snapping his body back to perfect function without any temporal instability. Eri's contribution. During this training, Eri visited her own rewind quirk, now gradually stabilizing under Recovery Girl's guidance, still gave off chaotic energy bursts when she was stressed. She stood near Izuku during his meditation, and he used her presence as the ultimate control test. He felt the chaotic, unstable -1 energy radiating from her small, trembling horn. Izuku's mental counter-reaction was to channel his rewind energy, not onto her, but around himself, creating a perfect stability bubble. He focused on maintaining his own 0-point against the external chaos of her quirk. He learned to compartmentalize the feeling of the +1, the temptation to fix her instability, and lock it away. He had to be strong enough to not interfere with her slow, natural healing process. Humor. The inadvertent architect. After achieving a brief moment of perfect equilibrium, Izuku decided to celebrate by making a simple cup of tea. He accidentally brushed the worn, chipped edge of the ceramic mug. The chipped section instantly underwent a 0-point reset, snapping back to a perfectly smooth, factory new state. Humor focus. He looked down to realize he hadn't just fixed the chip, he had forced the ceramic to revert to its perfect state, making the previously used mug now slightly too hot to hold due to its instantaneous return to factory heat from the firing process. He dropped the scalding, perfect mug. He was the perfect stabilizer of reality. But still terrible at making tea. He was ready. Izuku Midoriya was a walking paradox, a hero with the power to erase consequence, now forced to respect consequence more than anyone else. His mission in the coming war was to be the absolute 0 point, the hero who ensures that no matter how far the world decays, the foundation will always be restored. The Normal Liberation Front War (PLFW) erupted with horrifying speed and scale. Shigaraki Tamura, powered up and unchained, commanded a vast army of villains, unleashing catastrophic destruction across multiple cities simultaneously. The support pillar. Izuku Midoriya's role was finalized. He was the strategic stabilization unit for the pro-hero coalition. He was placed far from the front lines, protected by his mentor heroes. All Might and Aizawa, who knew his quirk's volatility made him too dangerous for direct, offensive combat. His mission was twofold: structural integrity and mass healing. Izuku stood at a forward operating base, connected to every major battlefield via a live feed. His power was constantly activated, not in one concentrated burst, but in a low, continuous 0-point set field that extended across the surrounding ruins. Structural rescue. As Shigaraki's decay tore through highways and buildings in the distance, Izuku focused his rewind on critical junctions. He wasn't stopping the decay, but instantly undoing the damage. A collapsing hospital wing would suddenly snap back to perfect integrity. A destroyed bridge would rapidly revert to its flawless, safe state. Observation. The villains were baffled. They would decimate a city block, only for it to be instantly and silently restored, forcing them to spend endless energy re-destroying the same structures. Mass casualty counter. Heroes began to fall, crushed under rubble or severely injured by powerful quirks. When a hero was extracted, Izuku was the final point of contact. LD heal injuries instantly, from broken spines to severe internal bleeding, without the lengthy recovery time of traditional healing quirks. He was keeping the entire hero roster 0-point perfect. Die to return to the fight moments after being rescued. Shigaraki's observation. Shigaraki Tamura, perched atop a decaying skyscraper, watched the chaotic battlefield with rising annoyance. His ultimate quirk, decay, was the power of absolute -1, reverting matter to dust. He was the dark mirror to Izuku's rewind +1. He noticed the uncanny resilience of the city structures and the impossibly quick return of injured heroes. Kurogiri, Shigaraki rasped, his eyes widening with recognition. That green quirk signature. It's the brat with the restoration quirk. He's undoing my work. Shigaraki understood the threat immediately. Decay was the gradual, irreversible breakdown of matter. Rewind was the instantaneous, ethical reversal of consequence. Their powers were in absolute contradiction. If I touch a building, he instantly resets it to its perfect state, Shigaraki realized. I am fighting the 0-point itself. He ordered his most powerful forces to locate and eliminate the source of the stabilization. The shimmering of reality. The strain on Izuku was immense. Maintaining a large-scale, continuous 0-point field against the overwhelming force of decay caused a dangerous fatigue. The temptation to use the +1 to amplify his range and reset entire city blocks at once was a constant mental battle. Every time he pushed his field too hard, the environment around him would shimmer, briefly flickering between the perfect, reset state and the decayed, broken state. The temporal headache was a searing pressure, warning him that his internal stability was failing. He was the single point of stability in a world designed for destruction. He was surviving, but he was barely holding the ethical line. He knew if he collapsed, the stabilizing force would vanish, and the decades of destruction he had held back would snap forward instantly. Humor focus. A fatigued Izuku, trying to reset a damaged communications antenna, accidentally used a minor +1 flicker. The antenna immediately reverted to its raw, unrefined metal state, collapsing into a small, useless pile of ore. He stared at the mess, cursing his lack of precision, while the hero dispatcher screamed for communication. He quickly had to reset the antenna back to its perfect, factory new state, leading to a sudden, confusing improvement in signal quality that baffled the comms technicians. Izuku Midoriya, the 0-point hero, was holding back the total annihilation of the world, one perfect, strenuous reset at a time. The battle was long from over, but the war was now defined by the silent, relentless clash between decay and rewind. Shigaraki Tamura, observing the relentless structural reversal across the war zone, realized that Izuku Midoriya was the single point of failure in his plan for total annihilation. He could not win if the consequences of his decay were instantly negated. He resolved to eliminate the rewind factor directly. The targeted strike, Shigaraki ended the city-wide chaos and launched a concentrated strike, accompanied by the strongest members of the Paranormal Liberation Front (PLF) toward the suspected stabilization point, the forward operating base. The base was protected by Aizawa-sensei, All Might, and a contingent of heroes. The moment Shigaraki's decay wave hit the perimeter, Aizawa's erasure sprang into effect, slowing the decay, but the power difference was immense. The base began to crumble. Izuku, shielded by the pros, poured every ounce of his stamina into maintaining the 0-point reset on the compound. He's pushing too hard. Midoriya, we can't hold this. All Might roared, deflecting a blow from a high-end Nomu. Shigaraki, seeing his opening, bypassed the main fight and launched himself directly at Izuku, his hand outstretched. A silent scream of -1 destruction. Decay versus rewind. The implosion. Izuku knew he couldn't dodge. If Shigaraki touched him, the simultaneous, conflicting quirk factors, absolute decay and absolute reset, would create a temporal paradox that would likely erase both of them from existence. Izuku unleashed his ultimate defensive field, a sphere of intense, continuous zero-po. Int rewind focused entirely on his body and the immediate 3 inches of air around him. Shigaraki's hand struck the rewind bubble. The impact was silent but catastrophic. The air itself seemed to scream as decay, reversing matter to dust, and rewind, reverting matter to a perfect state, collided. The two conflicting temporal forces cancelled each other out in a terrifying, momentary implosion of causality. Shigaraki's hand, which should have turned Izuku to dust, was momentarily paralyzed, forced into a stable, inert state. Izuku staggered, the energy drain forcing blood from his nose. His vision was almost completely obscured by the blinding, chaotic green shimmer of his quirk factor pushed to its breaking point. He can't touch me. He can't break the 0-point barrier. Izuku thought frantically, trying to maintain the shield. The ethical line breached. The confrontation was a stalemate, but Shigaraki had a backup plan. He focused his decay not on Izuku, but on the heavily armored pro-hero Fat Gum, who was shielding civilians nearby. Fat Gum's defensive quirk began to crumble. Izuku had to act. He couldn't drop his shield to save Fat Gum, and he couldn't maintain the 0-point field forever. He made a terrible decision. Ignoring Night Eye's command and Aizawa's warnings, Izuku intentionally channeled a massive surge of rewind +1 energy. He aimed the +1 not at Shigaraki, but at the ground behind the villain. Rewind +1, geological regression. The energy hit the earth. The ground, already destabilized by continuous decay and reset, violently regressed. It didn't just reset to pavement, it over-rewound into a pit of Precambrian magma and gas, a deep, primordial pit that opened instantly beneath Shigaraki. Shigaraki, losing his footing on the collapsing, regressing matter, fell into the superheated pit. The instantaneous, severe temperature change forced him to abort the attack and focus entirely on escaping the geological regression. The cost of the +1. Shigaraki was gone, forced into a temporary retreat, but the cost was devastating. Izuku collapsed entirely, the temporal backlash immediate. His entire body shrieked with pain, and the green shimmer surrounding him intensified into a bright, chaotic glow. He hadn't just used the +1, he had used it to rewrite a section of the city's geological history. His memories vanished. He forgot who All Might was, who Aizawa was, and why he was fighting. He was lost in a sea of scrambled temporal data. Aizawa rushed to secure the inert Izuku, his eyes widened in horror. His quirk factor. It's completely destabilized. He's pushed reality too far. Humor focus. As Aizawa secured him, Izuku blinked, staring at the hero's exhausted face. Who are you? Why is your hair floating? Where did the giant green puff of smoke go? Did I break the planet? Izuku was successfully evacuated, the ultimate tactical weapon now rendered useless, having sacrificed his mental stability to save the base. The 0-point hero had succumbed to the +1. The war was about to get much worse. The forced retreat of Shigaraki was a tactical victory, but the price was crippling. With Izuku Midoriya's mind compromised and his quirk factor in temporal shock, the zero-point reset field protecting the cities and heroes vanished instantly. The snapback of decay, the true ROR of Shigaraki's power was finally revealed. Decades of micro-damage and structural stress, which Izuku had been continuously reversing, suddenly snapped forward all at once. Massive collapses. Highways that had been clinging to life instantly crumbled into dust. Entire city blocks that Izuku had silently held at their 0 point fell into decay. The destruction became exponentially worse than before. Hero fatigue. The heroes who had been secretly relying on Izuku's immediate healing, resetting their fatigue and minor injuries, suddenly felt the full, accumulated weight of the past 24 hours of fighting. They were exhausted, injured, and overwhelmed. The unstoppable -1, Shigaraki, having recovered from the geological regression, returned to the battlefield with chilling efficiency. Without the rewind field to counter him, his decay became an unstoppable, terminal force, reducing everything he touched to annihilation. The heroes' fight devolved from a.s. stalemate into a desperate scramble for survival. The burden of leadership. Aizawa, battered and fatigued, became the reluctant general, trying to coordinate a defense against Shigaraki and the PLF army without their key asset. "We have lost our anchor," Aizawa shouted over the comms. "Focus on securing civilians. We cannot hold the structures. 0 point is gone." All Might, now fighting with raw, desperate power, noticed the grim difference. Every punch he threw, every blow he took, now left a lasting mark. The luxury of the instant physical reset was gone, and the limits of his own aging body were glaringly apparent. He was the stability, All Might gasped, struggling against a massive Nomu. Young Midoriya was holding back the consequence of the entire war. Eri's awakening. Meanwhile, safely hidden under the care of Recovery Girl, Eri was witnessing the chaos via news reports. Her unstable rewind quirk, which had been slowly stabilizing, reacted violently to the profound despair and destruction on the screens. Her horn began to glow brightly, emanating an intense, chaotic -1 energy. She didn't want to rewind the hero's injuries, she wanted to rewind the suffering of the world back to a time before the war, before the pain. Recovery Girl struggled to contain her. The surge of raw, untuned power was enough to momentarily de-age a nurse's broken arm back to a perfectly healed state. But the lack of control was terrifying. Eri was pushing her own rewind quirk past her 0 point, mirroring the collapse Izuku had just experienced. Humor. Iida's frustration. Iida Tenya, still reeling from the psychological impact of being instantly healed and then instantly paralyzed in previous battles, found himself facing a major structural collapse. He tried to use his engine boost, but his strained legs were too fatigued from the non-reset continuous fighting. "My engines, they are failing. Why is the consequence persisting?" Iida wailed, clutching his tired thigh muscles. Humor focus, because Midoriya-kun is resting, you idiot. Bakugo yelled, blasting past him. "Welcome back to the real world, where things stay broken when you break them." Iida, forced to rely on pure grit and painful, slow movement, was perhaps the only hero secretly grateful for the return of painful consequences, allowing him to properly calculate his limits. The absence of the 0 point hero had plunged the world into the brutal, chaotic reality of the -1. The fate of the war now rested on the hero's ability to fight a losing battle, and on Izuku's compromised mind finding a way to stabilize reality once more. Izuku Midoriya lay unconscious in the infirmary, his body perfectly intact thanks to his instantaneous self-reset, but his mind was a storm of temporal chaos. His quirk factor, overcharged with the raw, reality-altering energy of the +1, was fighting his consciousness. The scrambled labyrinth. Izuku's mind became a labyrinth of scrambled memories and contradictory realities. He relived his childhood, but in fragmented pieces. One memory had Bakugo with 2 quirks, another had All Might as a simple school teacher, and a third showed him graduating from UA. With a perfect, stable rewind quirk he had never overused. He saw the face of Kai Chisaki and the fear of Eri, but the memory of the actual battle was blurred, laced by the jarring image of the ground turning into primordial matter. The ultimate danger was the constant, internal pull toward -1, the temptation to simply reset his own damaged consciousness back to a state before the pain. Potentially erasing years of his own identity and experience. His training with Aizawa and Night Eye, the constant mental effort to define the 0 point, was the only thing anchoring him. He mentally sought the image of the blue light, the stable, contained state of his quirk. The internal fight for stability. In his delirium, Izuku began speaking aloud, his voice strained and panicked. I need the 0 point. I need the blue, not the red. The cost, the consequence, must remain. He fought against the tempting pull of the +1 to erase his memories of the battle. Of the geological regression, and the crippling fatigue. He knew that if he erased the memory of his failure, he would erase the lesson of his failure, ensuring he would repeat the catastrophic mistake. He focused on the face of Mirio, the pain of seeing his friend quirkless, and the terrified face of Eri. These were the consequences he chose to preserve. His mind locked onto these anchors, forcing the chaotic temporal energy to stabilize. Finally, after what felt like weeks of internal struggle, Izuku's consciousness snapped back. The chaotic green shimmer around his body subsided into the controlled, contained 0 point energy field. He sat up, gasping, his mind clear but utterly drained. The temporal headaches were gone, replaced by a dull, persistent exhaustion. The sign that his quirk factor had returned to a stable, but depleted, state. The call to arms. Recovery Girl was immediately alerted. She checked his vitals and his quirk factor stability. You're stable, dear, she said, relieved. But your energy reserves are critically low. You cannot use the rewind for days without risking total collapse again. Izuku looked at the live feeds. The situation was catastrophic. Cities were decaying, heroes were falling, and the -1 was winning. He knew he couldn't fight. His power was depleted, and his mind was still raw. But he could still analyze. He immediately requested the full tactical data on the PLFW and Shigaraki's current movement pattern. He began to rapidly process the relentless pattern of decay, trying to find a weak point. T didn't rely on the rewind counterattack. Humor, the confused pro-hero. During his recovery, a severely injured pro-hero, who had been instantly healed by Izuku weeks prior, was brought into the infirmary. The hero looked at Izuku, now fully recovered from his temporal exhaustion. You, the kid with the god's quirk. The pro-hero whispered, you look fine. Can you fix my reputation? I accidentally called my agency a dump on live TV. Quote. Humor focus. Izuku managed a weak, tired smile. I can fix your body, sir, but not your causality. That's a +1 I refuse to risk. He picked up the data sheets. His role was clear, he was the rewind analyst now. He had to use his perfect, stable mind to strategize a victory that his weakened body couldn't fight. The final phase of the war was not just about power, it was about precision. Stabilized but fragile, Izuku Midoriya was moved to the Central Pro-Hero Command Center, shielded by layers of security. He sat before massive tactical screens, his mind, sharp, perfect. And now deeply respectful of consequence, the single greatest asset the heroes had left against the relentless decay of Shigaraki Tamura. The algorithm of annihilation. Izuku's role became that of a strategic brain, interpreting Shigaraki's movements and predicting the decay pattern. His unique understanding of the -1 allowed him to see its flaws. He realized that Shigaraki, in his rage, was not decaying randomly, he was unconsciously targeting points of high structural and historical 0 point, places that had been perfectly restored by Izuku in the past. Izuku spoke rapidly into the comms system, directing the exhausted heroes like a maestro. Prediction: heroes, avoid the old municipal building. Shigaraki is targeting the last 0 point restoration I did there. Its foundation will crumble in 90 seconds. Tactical solution: Mount Lady, don't land on the East Highway. Its structural memory is too recent. Move to the West Service Road. It's naturally resistant to my rewind and will hold longer. His predictions were flawless, based on his intimate knowledge of how matter resists and then succumbs to temporal manipulation. He is fighting the war by predicting the physics of its destruction. Humor: the scrutiny of the analysts. The professional tactical analysts and support heroes in the command center were completely baffled by Izuku's instructions. Why is he telling them to run toward the structurally unstable bridge? One analyst whispered. He says it's Temporal resistance factor is too high, another replied, scratching his head. Izuku overheard their confusion and sighed into his headset. The old steel bridge, Agent, was never rewound. Its natural rust and imperfection make it a poor target for Shigaraki's pursuit of -1 perfection. The perfect, new structures decay faster because they offer a clearer target for his quirk's intent. Humor focus, the heroes were being guided to safety not by structural integrity, but by calculated imperfection. They had to seek out the old, rusty, imperfect structures to survive the perfectionist rage of Shigaraki's quirk. The quirk-canceling strategy. Izuku's most critical insight was the flaw in Shigaraki's ultimate defense. Shigaraki was now surrounded by multiple high-end Nomu, making a direct approach impossible. Izuku realized that the Nomu's shock absorption was an active quirk, and its existence relied on Shigaraki's continuous mental focus. Aizawa-sensei, you need to get close. Izuku commanded. Don't focus your erasure on Shigaraki. Target the Nomu's quirk factor. Aizawa, battered but resolute, followed the order. He erased the quirk of a Nomu. The creature's shock absorption immediately vanished, and it was instantly overpowered by the combined force of the heroes. Midoriya is right. We were wasting time trying to decay the Nomu. We need to disable their quirks. All Might realized. Izuku's guidance turned the tide from defensive chaos to a focused, targeted assault. They were no longer trying to fix the decay, they were cutting off the villain's power base. The ethical line redefined. As the heroes advanced, the Y managed to capture a low-level PLF member with a destructive, area of effect quirk. The hero was severely injured, and time was running out. A support hero looked at the inert Izuku. Midoriya-kun, you're the only one who can instantly heal the hero. Please, just a small 0-point reset. Izuku stared at his own hands, the lingering +1 scar a painful reminder. He shook his head. I can't. My quirk is too depleted to guarantee a stable 0 point. One wrong move, and I cause a temporal accident in the command center, Izuku explained, his voice strained but firm. We must rely on the traditional consequences. Bring in Recovery Girl now. He had finally mastered the ultimate ethical restraint. He was the only hero capable of instant, perfect healing, and yet he was the one who chose to step back and allow the natural consequences to take hold, ensuring the stability of the entire operation. The Rewind analyst was ready for the final, direct confrontation, armed not with power, but with perfect foresight and control. The heroes, guided by Izuku's flawless analysis, had neutralized the Nomu threat and localized the battle zone. Shigaraki Tamura was isolated but furious, unleashing massive, desperate waves of decay. The flaw in the -1. From the command center, Izuku stared at the tactical display, his gaze moving from the areas of total decay to the areas of stubborn structural integrity. He had a theory. All Might. Aizawa-sensei. Izuku called out, his voice cutting through the static. Shigaraki's decay is the ultimate -1, it reduces everything to a stable, inert state of dust. But that stability is its flaw. Izuku explained his hypothesis. When Shigaraki initiates decay, he's mentally searching for the perfect state of disintegration for the object. This mental focus creates a brief temporal stability point just before the decay completes. A moment of perfect, predictable physics. A moment where the decay is momentarily stable. All Might questioned, deflecting a crumbling pillar. Yes, if a hero can hit that stability point with a powerful, concentrated force, they can interrupt the final, complete decay process and create a counter-force. Izuku confirmed. The concentrated thrust. The strategy was set. The heroes would bait Shigaraki into activating a large-scale decay. Then, using Izuku's pinpoint timing, one hero would deliver a single, massive, concentrated blow to the center of the decay field. Bakugo Katsuki was the perfect candidate. His quirk, Explosion, was a chaotic, expansive force, the opposite of Shigaraki's perfect disintegration. Kachan, you're up. Izuku's voice was sharp. You need to wait for the signal. When his decay hits the east overpass, I want a full power, concentrated thrust into the center of the dust cloud. Don't let the decay complete. Bakugo, fueled by rivalry and a sudden respect for Deku's terrifying strategic mind, grinned fiercely. Don't tell me what to do, nerd. Just give me the timing. The critical timing. The scene was set. Shigaraki unleashed a massive decay wave aimed at a heavily populated area. The buildings began to crumble. Now, Izuku screamed into the comms. It's hitting the structural 0 point. 3, 2, 1, thrust. Bakugo launched himself with an unprecedented blast, concentrating all his explosive power into a single, kinetic thrust that collided with the center of Shigaraki's decay field. The impact was not an explosion, it was an implosion. Bakugo's chaotic force, hitting the brief moment of decay's stability, reversed the destructive momentum. The decay wave was instantly fragmented and neutralized. Shigaraki roared in pain and fury, staggering backward, his hands smoking. He was physically unharmed, but his decay quirk was momentarily shattered. Its continuous process disrupted the seizing of the villain. With Shigaraki stunned, Aizawa-sensei, protected by his team, finally reached the villain. His eyes glowed red, locking onto the compromised villain. Erasure. Shigaraki's powerful, evolved decay quirk was instantly suppressed. He was reduced to his base physical form, a man, not a monster. The heroes seized the villain. Shigaraki Tamura, the leader of the PLF, was captured. The major threat of the war was over. The quiet victory. The fighting slowly ceased across the war zone. The destruction was catastrophic, and the casualties were immense. But the world had been saved from total annihilation. Izuku Midoriya watched the final footage of Shigaraki being taken into custody. He was alive, his mind stable, but the cost was permanent. He had exhausted his power reserves, and his body was now fundamentally resistant to pushing the rewind beyond the most basic, stable 0 point. The +1, the ability to regress matter, rewrite history, and cause temporal instability, was permanently locked away. His final, catastrophic use of it to counter Shigaraki had taught his quirk factor its absolute, final limitation. He was no longer the unstable, reality-bending weapon. He was the 0 point hero, a powerful support pillar who could heal and repair, but who would forever respect the consequences he could no longer erase. The Paranormal Liberation Front War (PLFW) ended not with a final, destructive blast, but with the controlled, surgical capture of Shigaraki Tamura. The victory was messy, costly, and owed much to the analytical genius and ultimate sacrifice of Izuku Midoriya. The permanent 0 point. After the war, Izuku's status was clear. His power was profoundly limited but profoundly stable. The catastrophic use of the rewind +1 against both Overhaul and Shigaraki had permanently locked away the temporal regression function. His quirk factor had rejected the instability, leaving him with only the ethical, restrained, and precise 0 point reset. 0 point hero. Izuku could still instantly heal any injury, repair any structure, and reverse any immediate physical consequence. He was the perfect support hero, the ultimate medic, and the foundational stabilizer of society. No +1, he could no longer rewind objects out of existence, erase memories, or rewrite geological history. The terrifying, godlike power was gone, replaced by the responsibility he earned. He bore no physical scars from the war, as his quirk had instantly healed them, but he carried the deep, unshakable mental scar of the temporal chaos he'd unleashed. He would never again use his power without absolute respect for the consequence he was choosing to preserve. Graduation and the new hero society. Years passed. Izuku, Mirio, and the entire Class 1A graduated, entering a hero society shattered by the PLFW but guided by a new ethos, control and stability. Izuku, now a pro-hero, rejected the flashy title of Symbol of Peace, and chose to be known simply as the 0 point hero. His hero work was methodical, focusing on disaster zones and hospitals. He became the living guarantee that society could always recover. Eri's future. Eri's quirk, now completely stabilized with Izuku's help and her own diligent training, was used ethically. She could perform controlled, life-saving 0 point resets in a hospital setting, working alongside Recovery Girl. She, like Izuku, was a hero defined by restraint. The hero system. The heroes of his generation, Bakugo now using calculated, precise blasts, Todoroki using balanced defense, and Iida using controlled speed, were all influenced by the war's main lesson: limits are essential for control. The final conversation. One quiet afternoon, Izuku visited All Might Toshi Sensei, who was enjoying his retirement. You fulfilled your destiny, young Midoriya, Toshi-sensei said, smiling gently. You became the greatest hero. But not in the way anyone expected. I was never the symbol of peace you were, sensei, Izuku replied, looking at his hands, which were now still and silent, the green shimmer long gone. No. All Might agreed. I was the symbol of strength and victory. You are the symbol of stability and hope. You showed the world that true power lies in preserving life and structure, not destroying evil. You are the ultimate foundation, the assurance that no matter how far the world falls to ruin, it will always return to a safe, ethical, 0 point. Izuku, the boy who was born quirkless and then briefly held the power of a god, found peace in his final, permanent limitation. He walked into the future, a hero defined not by what he could destroy, but by what he chose, with perfect control, to restore. Katsuki Bakugo's veins were perpetually simmering with rage, but it wasn't the sludge villain or the UA entrance exam that truly tipped his anger into the absurd. It was Deku's quirk. It wasn't the power. Exactly. Bakugo could respect raw power. It was the precision, the effortless removal of consequences, and the sheer inconvenience of it all. It started small. During the battle training, Chapter 8. Bakugo had spent a full 10 seconds maneuvering to deliver a devastating explosion to the flank of the building where Deku was defending. The force of the blast should have rattled the structure, leaving him an opening. Instead, the moment the explosion hit the concrete, the sound thwumped into silence. The wall didn't crumble, it didn't even crack. It simply reset to a state of flawless, original integrity. What the hell was that? Bakugo screamed, his hands smoking. I reset the structural damage, Kachan. Deku's voice yelled back, calm and infuriatingly analytical. Your destructive force was reversed at the 0 point. Try a different approach. Bakugo felt his blood boil. He was wasting effort. He was wasting effort on the nerd who was supposed to be powerless. The unbreakable punch. Their personal rivalry became a Sisyphean struggle. Bakugo would land a punch, a solid, rage-fueled hit designed to leave a bruise and a lesson. But the moment his fist pulled back, Deku's muscle would reset. Did that even hurt? Bakugo demanded after landing a blow that should have sent Deku to recovery girl. Only for about 0.03 seconds. Deku replied, flexing the perfectly restored muscle fiber. I gathered the impact data and reset the trauma instantly. Your attack efficiency is 68% when approaching from the left. I don't need your damn data, Deku. I need you to stay broken when I hit you. That would violate the ethical parameters of the 0 point, Deku responded with maddening composure. The case of the constantly perfect boot. The running joke, and Bakugo's personal curse, was the incident with the chute Chapter 2. After Deku accidentally used a micro-reset on his scraped heel, Bakugo was convinced the nerd was using his power to subtly annoy him. It escalated during the sports festival Chapter 10. Bakugo, fueled by adrenaline, had been using his boots for maximum speed and traction, putting an immense strain on the synthetic soles. After the cavalry battle, Bakugo stormed off, his boots slightly scuffed and stretched from the abuse. Deku, walking behind him, saw a slight tear in the thread near the sole. Purely out of instinct and a respect for structural integrity, Deku slapped a silent 0 point reset on the boot before Bakugo was out of sight. The boot instantly reverted to its perfect, factory new state. It was unstretched, unmarred, and exactly half a size too small for Bakugo's swollen, post-battle foot. Bakugo spent the next hour raging in the locker room. It's a conspiracy. My left boot is fine. But my right one keeps reverting to a brand new, painful state. It's too perfect. He's messing with my footwear's causality. He bellowed. I swear, if he resets my sock, I'm quitting. The final humiliation. The ultimate comedic tragedy struck during a class exercise. Bakugo, trying to show off his aerial maneuverability, clipped the tip of a building and scraped his knuckles badly. The moment he landed, before he could even register the pain, Deku's hand shot out. 0 point reset. His knuckles were instantly healed, the cuts and swelling vanished. Bakugo stared at his perfect hand, then back at Deku. You are denying me the consequence. You deny me the lesson of the scrape. I need to feel the pain to remember not to make that mistake. Bakugo roared, waving his perfectly healed hand at the infuriatingly ethical Deku. Deku sighed, adjusting his glasses. I understand the need for consequence, Kachan, but physical integrity takes precedence over psychological lesson learning in a combat situation. I saved your hand, not your dignity. Bakugo could only scream in frustrated fury. He was fighting a villain who could undo his work, heal his teammates, and secretly reset his boots to the wrong size. All while citing ethical principles. The 0-point hero wasn't just powerful, he was the most infuriating enemy Bakugo had ever faced. Shoto Todoroki stood against the chaos of the USJ attack with his characteristic icy resolve. His power was pure elemental force, a direct response to conflict. But as he fought, he noticed the subtle, deeply unsettling presence of Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya wasn't on the front lines, trading blows with the villains. He was a ghost of consequence, constantly moving through the chaos, silently erasing it. The unwanted healing. During the height of the attack, Todoroki created a massive ice barrier to protect a group of trapped students. A mid-tier villain, a brute with a strength quirk, managed to slam his fist against the barrier, causing a sharp crack that sent a jolt of pain up Todoroki's wrist. It was a minor injury, but a necessary cost for protection. Before Todoroki could even shift his stance, Midoriya was there, moving with frantic efficiency. He didn't ask, he simply acted. A hand slapped Todoroki's wrist. 0-point reset. The pain vanished. The strained ligaments snapped back to their pre-fight perfection. Todoroki flinched. Pulling his arm back, his dual-colored eyes narrowed in confusion and anger. What did you do? I performed a 0-point reset on your wrist, Todoroki-kun, Midoriya explained, panting slightly. You had a microfracture. You're fine now. Continue defending. Todoroki felt a surge of cold fury, but it had nothing to do with the villain. You stole the consequence. He hissed. That injury was a cost. It was a reminder of my effort. You have no right to erase the physical reality of a battle. Midoriya looked genuinely surprised. But, I was stabilizing your physical integrity. That's my function. Why would you want to retain an injury? Because the injury matters, Todoroki insisted, sending a concentrated stream of ice toward an advancing villain. It marks the effort. It proves the sacrifice. Your power makes our struggles meaningless. The philosophical duel. The philosophical clash came to a head during their sports festival match, Chapter 11. Todoroki was determined to prove that his elemental power, and the pain and consequence that came with it, held more value than Midoriya's perfect, effortless stability. Todoroki used his fire side, pushing past his mental limits to prove a point. Midoriya, instead of fighting the fire, reset his own body, effortlessly enduring the heat. Why do you keep doing this? Todoroki demanded, his voice strained by the effort of maintaining the heat. Why do you refuse to acknowledge the damage? I acknowledge the damage, Todoroki-kun, Midoriya replied, his voice calm amidst the inferno. Quote, but my quirk dictates that I restore the 0-point. I preserve life and health. Your power is destructive, mine is restorative. You create consequence, I deny it. Todoroki felt a genuine collapse. When Midoriya used the 0-point reset to erase his fatigue. The physical memory of the struggle, the defining element of his effort, was simply gone. It felt like Midoriya hadn't just healed him. He had erased the importance of the fight itself. Post-war acknowledgement. It wasn't until the aftermath of the PLFW that Todoroki truly understood the value of the 0-point hero. During the war, Todoroki sustained a brutal injury that left him permanently scarred. When Izuku was stabilized and able to use his 0-point reset again, he approached Todoroki. I can reset the scar, Todoroki-kun, Izuku offered quietly. It will be as if the injury never occurred. Todoroki looked down at the permanent, physical reminder of the war. He thought of the terrifying, chaotic +1 that Izuku had risked to save them all. He shook his head. No, Midoriya. The scar stays. He looked at Izuku, his eyes holding a new respect. I learned the hard way that not all consequences should be erased. But I also saw that you chose to be the anchor in a world of decay. You chose to keep the foundation of life stable so that we could keep our battles. You saved my life multiple times, and you restored Mirio's quirk, a consequence that deserved to be reset. The scar stays, Todoroki affirmed, because I earned it. But I'm grateful that the world has its 0-point to ensure the consequences we need to keep, stay. And the ones that mean annihilation, do not. Todoroki accepted the scar, and he finally accepted Midoriya's power, not as a negation of struggle, but as the essential, ethical guarantor of survival. For years, Eri lived with her quirk as a curse. Her power, Rewind, was chaotic, consuming, and terrifyingly destructive. Every time it flared, it threatened to unmake the world around her, starting with herself. She was the -1, the embodiment of uncontrolled regression. Then, she met Izuku Midoriya. The jolt of recognition. The first time she touched him, fleeing from Overhaul in the alley, Chapter 17. The shock wasn't just fear, it was a profound, startling recognition. When her unstable, chaotic energy met Izuku's Rewind +1, the resulting temporal instability was violent. But in that brief, agonizing moment, Eri didn't just feel fear, she felt completion. His power was the missing piece. Where her energy was a wild, screaming hurricane that regressed life out of existence. His was a strong, steady blue flame that snapped reality back to perfect health. She was the raw, untuned power, he was the perfectly tuned 0 point. She watched him fight for her, risking the utter annihilation of his own mind, Chapter 22, to save her from Overhaul. He used the terrifying +1, the power she feared most, to surgically sever her captor's quirk. He paid the price with his own sanity. Yet he held the line. The gift of stability. After the war, the true nature of their shared quirk factor became apparent. The energy she had shared with him during their confrontation, and the controlled environment Izuku later provided, allowed her own power to finally find its 0 point. As she began her slow, careful training with Recovery Girl and Aizawa, Izuku was her constant, quiet benchmark. When my power feels like it's spinning too fast, Eri confessed to him once, her voice small, it feels like it will break the world. Mine felt like that too, Izuku replied gently, showing her his hands, which now only emitted a faint, controlled 0 point glow. But I learned to imagine the consequence. The destruction is tempting, Eri, but the perfect restoration is the heroic choice. Quote, he wasn't teaching her how to be strong, he was teaching her how to be still. He taught her to visualize her power not as a weapon that consumes time, but as a scalpel that restores physical consequence to its ethical, safe point. The scars and the hope. Eri looked at Izuku, knowing he carried the massive temporal scars, the occasional flicker of scrambled memory, the constant low fatigue, from his catastrophic use of the +1 to save her. She knew she was the source of that danger, but he never blamed her. Instead, he chose to internalize the failure and master the 0 point forever. To Eri, Izuku was the living proof that her terrible power could be used for good. He was the stable anchor, the perfect echo who took the volatility of her quirk factor and turned it into the ultimate promise. No matter how broken things get, they can always be made whole. She was the little girl who could rewind. He was the hero who could guarantee restoration. They were two sides of the same incredible, terrifying, and ultimately hopeful paradox. Sir Night-Eye, severely injured but alive after the raid on the Shihasaikai, watched the final moment of the Paranormal Liberation Front War (PLFW) from his hospital bed. His quirk, Foresight, had shown him a bleak, fixed future, a future where the heroes failed, where decay triumphed, and where the world spiraled into chaos. He had dedicated his life to preventing that vision, but he knew the moment the war erupted, his initial foresight remained terrifyingly consistent. The original prophecy shattered. Night-Eye watched the screens detailing the massive structural damage and the temporary collapse of the hero defense, Chapter 27. He knew those moments were leading to the terrible outcome he'd foreseen. Then, he watched Izuku Midoriya, the unstable variable, return to the command center and begin guiding the heroes as the Rewind Analyst, Chapter 30. Izuku wasn't fighting the consequence anymore, he was predicting it. He used his understanding of his own power's opposite, decay, to anticipate every destructive move. As Shigaraki was captured, not by raw power, but by a strategic maneuver, a calculated thrust into a temporal stability point, Night-Eye felt a profound, intellectual shock. He called Izuku to his room the moment the young hero was stable enough to walk. Midoriya, Night-Eye said, his voice quiet. The usual stoicism replaced by a deep curiosity. My quirk shows me the absolute future. It has never once been wrong. My vision of the PLFW, it was one of utter defeat. He leaned forward. Yet, you defied it. Not by getting stronger, but by controlling yourself. You accepted the limitation of the 0 point and refused the temptation of the +1 to truly rewrite history. The new definition of destiny. Izuku explained his logic. I couldn't fight your prophecy, sir. I couldn't beat the future you foresaw. But when I realized my rewind +1 was the only thing that could actively contradict the timeline, I realized I had to stabilize that power. I had to make my actions predictable and ethical. You chose to let the lesser damage remain, Night Eye noted, his eyes thoughtful. You allowed the structural collapse to happen, Chapter 27, knowing it would teach the heroes to rely on themselves, instead of rushing in to prevent it. You let your memories of the worst moments stand, preserving the lesson. Night Eye smiled, a rare, genuine expression of respect. You didn't defy the future, Midoriya. You outsmarted it. You didn't change the consequences. You chose the consequences that led to stability. You used your 0 point not to reverse time, but to perfect the outcome that was always possible. Night Eye finally accepted that the future was not a fixed painting, but a foundation that could be reset and stabilized. Izuku had taught the Master of Fate that destiny was ultimately about ethical choice and unwavering control. Go, Midoriya, Night Eye concluded, resting back in his pillow. You are the symbol of stability. Now go ensure the stable future you chose is preserved. The war was won, but the destruction left by the -1 was staggering. With the dangerous rewind +1 functionality permanently locked away, the heroic cleanup effort was back to basics: grit, effort, and painful, manual labor. Bakugo Katsuki and Iida Tenya, still dealing with the psychological whiplash of constant, instantaneous resets during the war, were assigned to a post-decay cleanup crew focused on salvaging a massive, collapsed highway. The problem of stagnation revisited. Bakugo, used to fighting, found the slow pace of structural demolition infuriating. He tried to blast a particularly stubborn piece of crumbled pillar. Damn it! Why is this still here? Bakugo roared, setting off a small explosion that merely chipped the concrete. Iida, wearing a helmet and a highly reflective safety vest, marched over, chopping the air with rigid form. Bakugo, your frustration is understandable, but your methodology is flawed. Midoriya is not here to perform an instantaneous 0 point reset on the damage. We must wait for the structural analysts. Why should we wait? Bakugo raged. Just a week ago, that damn nerd would have snapped this whole pillar back to its factory new state in 2 seconds. This is pathetic. It is reality, Bakugo. Iida countered, pushing up his glasses. The reality of consequence. We must respect the physical memory of the damage. The curse of consequences. Later that afternoon, Iida, rushing to move a piece of heavy equipment, miscalculated a turn, a common flaw in his overly rigid speed. His right knee slammed hard into a railing. He stopped, bracing himself for the familiar, comforting surge of green light and the instant snap back to perfection. He waited for the internal reset. Nothing happened. Iida swayed, the genuine, non-rewound pain of the bruise hitting him hard. He winced, rubbing his knee. Bakugo saw the whole thing and burst into hysterical laughter. Ha! Look at the speed freak. You hurt yourself, and it stays hurt. Welcome back to the real world, where consequences are permanent, Iida. Silence, Bakugo. Iida hissed, hopping on one leg. I am simply experiencing the natural feedback loop of physical consequence. It is an essential component of learning. I will now calculate the precise recovery time required. Just limp. Bakugo yelled, wiping a tear of joy from his eye. You look like a wind-up toy running out of batteries. The final, perfect flaw. Exhausted, Bakugo sat on a pile of rubble. He reached out to grab a water bottle, but his hand slipped, and he scraped his knuckles sharply on a piece of jagged metal. He reflexively flinched, instinctively waiting for the automated, internal 0 point reset that had protected him for months. Again, nothing. He stared at the small cut on his knuckle. It was bleeding, it hurt, and it wasn't going away instantly. It was a normal injury. He sighed, pulling out a small gauze pad. Damn it, he muttered. I forgot what a simple scrape felt like. Izuku, walking past in his new role. He is the strategic stabilization coordinator, wearing a suit and carrying a clipboard, much to Bakugo's quiet disgust, noticed the cut. Oh, careful, Kachan, Izuku said, stopping. Bakugo looked up, eyes widening. This was it. The nerd was going to mock him, or worse, heal him. Izuku merely offered a small bottle of antiseptic spray. Don't worry, Izuku said, with a slight, knowing smile. I am only using the 0 point on the building foundations now. You get to keep that scar. You earned it. Bakugo stared at the antiseptic, then at his bleeding knuckle, then at Izuku's perfect, unmarred hands. He scowled. Yet a flicker of strange, grudging relief passed through him. He had to admit, the scar did look pretty cool. It was a tangible consequence, and for Bakugo, that was a kind of victory. He finally had something that the 0 point hero couldn't take away. Thanks for watching guys, hope you all enjoy this video. If you do, please consider leave a like, share and subscribe.